2 weeks in a row I forget to wear the microphone when I hit start. All right, let's see how that works. Hopefully not too noisy for you guys. Hello everyone. So this week's live stream is a topic chosen by one of our moderators in Club Milo's Reef. Club Milo's Reef is a group that I created on Facebook that is designed specifically to help hobbyists be successful. And we're answering questions every single day. If you have a specific question and you want to get my input, you can always tag me or tag Milo's Reef Inc. and I will chime in. So it's a great way to reach out to me. Thanks for giving me a feedback on the sound. It's always nice to know that's working right. This week's stream is specifically about sand beds and sandbed maintenance and keeping that sand clean and white. Yes, I am late as expected. I actually was trying to get the software to do something and it wasn't cooperating. And I was just like, oh, now I'm going to be late again. And I was. So I wanted to kind of get into this topic. But before that, there's a couple other things of maintenance I need to discuss. I don't know if you are in the local area, Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. But if you are somewhere near Dallas, there is an event right now called the Texas Coral Fest that's going on till I think about 5 o'clock. So you have 3 hours to get over there and buy some corals. So if you want to go do that, you should do it. They invited me, but I wanted to do my live stream and I wanted to kind of relax. But I've got plans for this evening. So I thought, let me stream with you guys and then I'll go on with my life. A second thing I want to let you know is Reef Trace, the app that's for iOS and Android. There were some people with older iPhones that are having problems with the app crashing, and a new version has been updated. There was actually a problem somewhere in the code that was, the way I read it, was it wasn't Reef Trace's fault. Apple updated something, and Reef Trace was unable to connect to that update, and now it's not crashing on the older phones. So what we call those older phones are legacy phones because you shouldn't have them anymore, but you still do. And so people with like an iPhone 6 or 7 or an 8, you know, those are like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Those phones, you know, they're actually losing support somewhere in December anyway. So you really should upgrade. I get a new phone every single year. In the old days, I used to get a new phone every 2 years. So I'm just encouraging you to stay up to date. Android-wise, I'm not sure what the scoop is because I live in an Apple world, and so it may be fully updated. It may not even be. It may be working perfectly fine. You weren't running into that problem. I forgot to ask the developer, but I just wanted you to know it's available and it's very useful. I've seen some of the recent feedback on iTunes, and the reviews are really good. So people are really enjoying the ability to keep notes and track their parameters and find stores near them. That's my favorite part of the app. I use it everywhere I go. I always open up what's near me and I go look and I go investigate and see those stores. All right, so today let's talk about sand beds and what you can do to keep it looking nice. And I know some of you don't even have sand and so you don't care whatsoever. Also, I wanted to make a point that our live streams that I do every Saturday at 2 o'clock Central Time, usually the first 30 minutes or so is about the topic in the title. You know, let's discuss, and then we have a topic. And then after that, it's a Q&A. And so if you're thinking, oh my God, I don't have 2 hours to sit here and watch this, I don't blame you. I get it. So a lot of people are listening to this or while they're working on their tanks or they're tuning in and they're just watching and relaxing. I mean, I'm not really sure how people consume it specifically, but I do know 1 out of 5 people is watching this on their television. So I'm on a huge screen more than likely near their reef tank, and I can see your tank. All right, so if you don't have a sand bed and you're running a bare bottom tank, you've probably noticed you have to stay on top of keeping it clean because detritus will amass in certain spots. And then you can just siphon it out, possibly during a water change or maybe just part of your maintenance for the week where you just siphon some crud out of there. When I was just visiting Ryan's house, he's got a 1,000-gallon reef that's about 3 years old and it's really looking nice. Tidal Gardens did a great video about it 6 months ago. And so I was just there last week, or on Tuesday, for Disney Plus night. We all met at his beautiful home and we sat in his theater and we watched the first episode of Mandalorian, which was awesome. And it was a lot of fun to sit there with a bunch of like-minded individuals. And I know you can do that in any movie theater, but these were like-minded individuals that like reef tanks too. And that's kind of a harder one to to line up in a regular theater. Anyway, we had a great time, and while I was there looking, I saw, he's got a bare bottom tank. It's 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, and he's grown a lot of monopora across the bottom of the tank, like a huge, man, almost the size, well, actually probably about the size of a pizza. And the thing is, there was like this weird fur inside between all the branches, and like, what is that? Because I didn't recognize it, and he told me it's detritus, and I was like, wow. And he just literally, the way the flow works in the tank, it blows it all into the center of that coral, and then every so once in a while, he'll go in there and he'll, I guess, siphon that all out. So if you're a bare bottom, you have to siphon. If you're a sandbed guy like me, we don't siphon. And there are some people out there that like to do the gravel vac system, where they take a long tube, connect it to a smaller tube. They sell these gravel vacs in most aquarium supply places. And they come in different lengths. I've gotten one that was about this tall before. I thought was going to be kind of useful, and turns out it wasn't. But the larger ones are great. And I've watched the fish store by me, Frank. He's constantly siphons a sandbed. I'd say 2-3 times a week. And that's one of those things. So here's what I wanted to say about that. If you do want to gravel vac your sand to keep it nice and white, you have to keep gravel vacuuming it to keep it nice and white, because you're sucking out everything. You're sucking out all the detritus, which is good. You're also sucking out some bacteria and any kind of little benthic critters that could be living in the sandbed, because it is vacuuming. I mean, it's really, you can see all the crap tumbling through the water as the sand pours back out. And that is, so your sand can't really look normal if you're constantly vacuuming it. But if you keep doing it, it always looks great. It's just one of those things where how much maintenance do you want to do on the sandbed? For myself, I never touch the sandbed. And I've had this tank behind me is 6 years old, and the sandbed was put in, 6 years ago. And it's the same sandbed. I'm not scared of it. I'm not worried that there's something evil deep down inside of it. Each time I've had to break down an older tank of mine and I took out the sand, I didn't find like layers of sulfuric smelling sediment. I didn't have black patches that were scary looking. It was just sand and a lot of detritus. So it might be time for me to go in there and kind of do a little bit of cleanup. One of the things that Dwayne's been suggesting to me, which I think he's nuts, the tank's too big, but he wants me to take a turkey baster and just puff at the sand everywhere. I mean, I'll just get a hand cramp doing that. But he's saying if you were to do that regularly for a while, you'll get a lot of that stuff that's in the upper half inch. You'll get it out and your tank will be cleaner. So I haven't tried it yet. I think he's nuts, but maybe I'll get creative and decide to, or what should I say, not creative, but motivated to give it a shot and see what it does. But, so how does my sand stay so nice and clean? Let's see. You can kind of see here in that picture. I mean, the sand is white, and Spock is doing what she does every single day. She just stays right there and watches me all day long. The sand in my tank is basically maintained by the fish, by the hermit crabs, by the fighting conch, the serpent starfish. Did I say hermit crabs? I have a few Nacerius, not enough. All of those little guys constantly are stirring the sand and keeping the sand nice and clean. And I don't have issues with like weird patches of cyano. I don't have issues with like weird brown stuff. I know a lot of people with new tanks are constantly running into this issue where their sand is just brown, and the question's always, is it diatoms? Is it cyano? Is it dinoflagellates? And it's always usually one of those three. And people are getting more and more used to using microscopes to look at exactly what is on their sand. They'll take a sample out, they put it under a lens, and then they get online and they say to people, what is this? And then people can chime in, yes, that is this. Or you can compare against other microscopic pictures from other people and see what they have. I still haven't to this day bought a microscope. It's one of those things I was thinking about doing a few years ago, and I might as well do it now. Odds are it's on Amazon, it's probably affordable, and it probably plugs right into your phone. So, I mean, that kind of technology is at our fingertips now, and we can actually look at things up close and see what's going on. The first thing people usually say when your sand isn't looking clean is they tell you to increase the flow in the tank. And that is kind of unspecific. It's not super helpful. Increase the flow. Okay, what do? Turn up my DC pump? What exactly can I do? And then the other problem is as soon as I turn up my flow, my sand bed moves. So let me show you guys this. We're going to go to my website here. And if you go to my tanks and then go to the 400 gallon, which I'm actually on right now, then on this page here, there's a series of articles all about the tank. And I probably need to do an update page of some kind, I don't know what. But on page 2, it shows the deep sand bed that I use. And this is the sand that I've been using now, and I just wanted you to get a good look at it. So the grains of sand are really, really tiny. They are, I'd say, whoops, can't move that. Here we go, let's put it over here. I'd say it's about 2 to 3 millimeters across, and I know that's not, that's using metrics, but that's what it says on the packaging, so that's why I'm going with that number. Let's call it a 1/16 of an inch. It's not large. That's a thumb screw that I put in there for a sense of scale. And there was my bunny I used to have. I let her run around in there. And so the brand of sand that I use is called Tropic Eden. And Tropic Eden is sold by Premium Aquatics. And it's called Reef Flakes. I don't know why they spelled it that way, but it's reef and then flakes. And this sand has been great in my tank. I've taken it out when my tank leaked. I washed it out really well. And then I went ahead and I put it back in the tank for the new setup. So this is the sand that I use, and it doesn't blow around. It does move a little bit, but it's not something that I am constantly battling with trying to get correct. All right, let's see if I can get back to our camera. I run Vortec pumps, and they blow water out as they draw water in, so it can kind of suck the sand bed toward the Vortec. It doesn't blow it into the column, but it creates like a hill, and it can, because of that ebb and flow, it can create like a divot or a low spot, and that typically happens in front of the yellow scroll coral in my tank. But the other end of my tank doesn't have that problem at all. And right behind me over here is an MP40. Oops. I should take this off the screen. I left it on there too long. Sorry, guys. Right here's an MP40. And that MP40 is blowing straight across under the 2 flow accelerators. And if I were to turn it up even higher, they would make this sand blow more this direction. It would move it across. So instead what I'm doing is I'm just creating enough flow to keep movement in the tank, to keep detritus in suspension, and then let it be trapped in something. Whether, mainly, my main belief has always been to trap it with a protein skimmer. But there are times when you're doing a really deep cleaning, and then a filter sock of some kind, 200 micron, 100 micron, 10 micron, anything super fine will trap a lot of stuff quickly, and you can kind of export a lot of decay and waste. Other things that you can add to the water is Live Rock Enhance, which is a bacteria that consumes waste, and that is something you can add to your tank 2-3 times a week for a month or so, and you'll notice everything getting cleaner. It's not going to clean a sand bed, but it's going to clean some of the stuff in the sand bed, but I wouldn't expect it to just suddenly, oh, the sand is white because I use Live Rock Enhance. I don't think that's going to happen. I do believe if you have hints of cyano in your tank, it'll get rid of that. I've seen that personally. And so if you start to see a little bit of pink patches, just a little, I'm not talking about blankets, then you can go ahead and use Live Rock Enhance and watch that stuff just go away as all your rock gets clean and the walls get cleaner and the coralline starts getting richer and thicker. So that part I like. Another product that people like to use is Dr. Tim's Waste Away, and that's the type of bacteria you can add to the tank. You could try, and see the idea is this, that if you have, okay, we have bacteria in our tank, and then let's say something starts to get out of hand. Cyanobacteria, okay? It's not an algae, it's a bacteria. The premise is that if this bacteria is getting out of control, there's a couple of solutions, and one of those solutions or mindsets that people are leaning more toward these days is to use a competing bacteria to outcompete the cyano and beat it back into submission. Because cyanobacteria doesn't go away. It's invisible most of the time. But when it becomes visible, and I've talked about this in the cyanobacteria video, when it becomes visible, then we hate it. And if you have a tank that's got a big red blanket or multiple blankets or different patches of red, you can siphon it out. Stirring your sand will not get rid of cyanobacteria, and it'll be gone for a few hours, and then it's going to be just as bad as it was before. And if you see it going away at night and it comes back in during the daytime, that's completely normal because cyanobacteria is photosynthetic. It becomes visible during the daytime and it becomes invisible at night as it basically turns clear again, and then it blooms red again the next day. It's pretty annoying. Now, one of the tricks to removing cyano is, and I'm talking about this because it's part of the sand bed, but I realize it gets on the rock as well. It can even get on corals. But let's just focus on the sand. If I'm trying to clean my sand and I have a cyanobacteria bed on there, what I would do is I would turn off all the flow in the tank, and I would take like a Kent scraper, some kind of a glass scraper, and or a credit card if you want to get your arm wet, and you can just scooch all the cyano into a pile. So it's one big mass. And then you can take some kind of tubing and siphon out the bulk of it all at once, instead of trying to siphon off something very thin on the layer of your sand where you keep sucking out sand. So I try to create a pile, siphon out the pile, and now I've removed, let's say, 90% of it. It's still present, there's still some in there. But now at this point I could treat my tank with ChemiClean or Red Cyano RX. Both of those products are excellent for removing cyanobacteria, and they do it in 3 days. So, or at the most 5. And I have an article on my website that tells you exactly how to use it. And I highly recommend you follow my method because it's the best method for making it work and not saying, well, I tried and it didn't work. Now, if you tried to kill cyanobacteria and you don't have cyanobacteria, you won't have a solution. So if your sand is covered with dinoflagellates, for example, putting in ChemiClean or Red Cyano RX doesn't do anything, and it could even potentially make the dinoflagellates worse. So it is important to know what is on your sand. And then the third thing that's on our sand often is diatoms, which is sort of like a brown dusting. It's here and there. It's here for a few weeks and then it's gone. Diatoms are consumed by bacteria, and that's what we want. We want some diatoms, we want the bacteria to consume it, and then we want it to go away. And if you have something that's persisting for much longer than weeks, if it's going on for months and months and months, then you may not have diatoms. It may be something, it's more than likely dinoflagellates. And dinoflagellates have always been a problem for all the hobbyists, and it has taken people right out of the hobby because it's this horrible, bubbly, snot-looking blanket that everything that touches it dies. It's very toxic. There's not very many animals out there that'll eat the stuff, and the ones that shouldn't, that touch it, die, which adds more nitrate and phosphate to the water, which just fuels the dinoflagellates. And so sometimes the cure is to turn off the lights for a few weeks, to wrap the tank with plastic or blankets or something to shield it from any kind of daylight, and don't do any water changes whatsoever, and let it burn off. You know, basically it runs out of all the things it fuels on and it just withers away. But it's really hard on your livestock doing this, and there's a good chance you'll lose livestock in the process. But if your tank is that far gone, and one time, I still can't find these pictures, I went to a guy's house and he had the most amazing dinoflagellate bloom I'd ever seen in my life, and I took 40 pictures. And I have gone through all of my pictures repeatedly trying to find those images to show you guys, and I can't find it. But one day, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll stumble on them. But his bloom, there was like this green type algae, it almost looked like green cyano, and it had like these strings coming up with bubbles on the top, and it was just almost like reverse raindrops, but they're all coming upward. And it was all over the rockwork. It was on all the lock line, and in the overflow box teeth, and on the pumps, and on the cleaning magnet, and on the frag racks. It was on everything. And I thought, well, this is fantastic imagery to help people understand what is dinoflagellates versus there's this brown stuff, and I don't know if it's this, or this. These you knew from a distance. You could see from across the room. So if you're dealing with dinoflagellates, you're going to have to come up with a solution. And there are a few cures for dinoflagellates. I usually don't like to talk about it because I haven't, got a lot of personal experience with them. I've only been touched by them a couple of times briefly, and I didn't let it take hold. But if you have dinoflagellates in your tank, one of the solutions that came out sometime was that you could go ahead and you could treat the tank with hydrogen peroxide, the 3% stuff you get at the pharmacy, and you put in 1 milliliter per 10 gallons of water for 8 days in a row, and it would get rid of dinoflagellates. However, that only works if you have a little bit. If you have a systemic problem that's system-wide and it's everywhere, I don't even know if you could even use enough peroxide to do it without affecting livestock negatively. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are taking good care of our livestock. And so that's where I feel like sometimes our solution is going to be manual removal. And I know it's never fun, and it's so much nicer just to be able to pour a bottle of something in there and call it a day. But if you have a dinoflagellate problem, then I think filtering out as much of it as you can to reduce its population will be the first big step in the right direction. And it will begin to reveal your sandbed again. But there's a system that I still think is nuts called microbubbling, and that's where you pump in the finest of air bubbles into your tank. You basically turn your tank into a quote-unquote protein skimmer, and it the little tiny bubbles. They have to be super fine for this to work because they need to get all the way down and latch on and lift all that crap off the surface of your rock and off your sand and into the overflow box and hopefully get caught in a sock or exported with a protein skimmer. But if you're just doing normal size air bubbles, you're not going to have as much luck. I know one person that was doing it every single night for about 5 hours a night with timers. And she pointed her lock line straight down into the tank, which is very dangerous because if you've got lock line that's pointed like this and the power goes out, the water's going to drain to the tip of the lock line. But if you have your lock line pointed down like this, the water's going to come all the way down to here and drain into your sump and could overflow the sump. So that's the danger, that if for some reason there's a power outage, you could lose a lot of water, make a flood. But if you can make sure your sump can handle it, the point of pointing the lock line down was she put the air stone right in front of the return pump. It sucked in and chopped up the air into tiny bubbles and then shot those micro bubbles into her reef itself, and it helped lift all that crap off the sandbed. It's also a way to help kind of cleanse your corals at the same time because the bubbles will kind of irritate the corals and they'll slough off that slime. And so it can kind of help them. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this, but it's a method I've heard works. There's a product by Fauna Marin that takes about 3 weeks called Dino X. And you could use that product and follow their instructions closely. So these are some of the solutions to solving dinoflagellates that are covering our sandbed. But let's just say you don't have cyano, you don't have diatoms, you don't have what did I say? Dinoflagellates, cyano, and diatoms. If you don't have those three and you're still your sand looks a little dirty, the other thing could be happening is, for example, you might be running biopellets. And when you run biopellets in a system, or if you were to run the Zeovit, they had these rocks, I'm trying to think what they were called, but you'd put these rocks inside a reactor and then once a day you would plunge it to shake all the rocks, and the stuff that came off the rocks would end up inside your tank and it would dust the top of your sandbed with a mulm, M-U-L-M. So getting rid of the mulm is another one of these, move the water over the sand to kind of puff it up and hopefully get enough flow in the tank to export it into filter socks or the protein skimmer. So you may be dealing with that. And then lastly, it was what I started with, is all the creatures that you need to put in your tank. I just feel like no one ever puts enough cleanup crew in their tanks. You don't hear enough of it. It's always, oh, my tank looks like crap and I've got 3 snails and a hermit crab and an emerald crab and it's not working. And I'm like, well, what size is your tank? And they're like 180 gallons. I'm thinking 3 snails? 3? So I have for a long time told people 1 critter per gallon, and I realize that sounds like a lot. In my tank, in 400 gallons, I need 400 critters. And I do. I add a couple of hundred at a time to the tank once a year. And people say, well, I don't want to buy hermit crabs because they kill my snails. Well, without hermit crabs, you're going to have some issues. You have to have a little bit of everything. Just like in the ocean, there's a little bit of everything. The ocean doesn't say no hermit crabs allowed because it kills snails. Somehow they all coexist and they seem to thrive. Now in our tanks, you may end up with some empty snail shells for a variety of reasons. It could be the snail fell upside down and is sitting on the sand, and a fish saw that and went pow and ate it. And then you walk over and there's hermit crabs cleaning out the shell, and you're thinking, oh, those hermits are so bad. They're not that bad, and they're not that aggressive. If your snails are up on the glass, the hermit crabs are not. And I have watched snails go up the glass with a hermit crab on their back, and the hermit crab kind of goes in a circle forever. And then eventually the snail walks somewhere else to where the hermit crab can go down the silicone and back down to the sandbed and back into the corals and the rockwork. So I wouldn't, don't fear hermit crabs. If you don't like the aggressiveness of hermits in your tank, then pick different hermits. For example, the blue legs are very aggressive. The red legs are not. The scarlets are not. The Halloween are not. And then tiny blue legs. And when I mean tiny, I'm talking tiny. You know, something that's like a 1/16 of an inch wide, the critter itself, not the shell. But a little, tiny little guy. Because they're so small, they can't do damage. They can't pick at a snail and hurt it. They're itty bitty. It's like David versus Goliath. So if you can get tiny blue legs, you can get a lot of those. They will work on your tank and they will clean all that little algae that happens right here down between the glass and the sand right there, that spot there that happens so often. Also, I might as well mention this. Let me see. Let me adjust the camera here. I want to show you something else here. Okay, that's really, really white. Will that get better? No. Well, the point I'm trying to show you is this anyway, right here. So this right here is got this reddish stuff in there, and it actually kind of looks like cyano, to be honest, right there. And that's not a huge surprise to me because I have some cyano happening in my refugium. But what I wanted to tell you was that you can take some kind of a hotel key card or credit card and get your arm in the tank, and you can just go right through here and clean that out, and that way you have nice clean sand from the front of the tank and you won't see this ugliness. And it's just a matter, in my case, getting out the walkboard and then scraping clean through here, and then the fish, of course, are going to come over to try and get a bite. They get all super excited. But this is not something you have to fear. You can definitely go near that. You can definitely touch it. You're not going to cause chaos in your tank by cleaning the area between the glass and the sand. That little bit is totally fine. And even if you moved a finger's width of all the sand, you still would not hurt your reef. So don't fear that. All right. Boy, that was some horrible lighting. All right. Hey, Eric, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. Let's see. I guess I should answer some questions now. Let's see what I can do here. Okay, let me start at the top. Give me a second here. Odile, I'm glad to hear you got your order. That's good news. I've been working all week trying to get orders out, and that's why I didn't get that video out last weekend that I promised. Abel, thank you for being a subscriber for so long. You have seen a lot of videos. Let's see. Thank you for tuning in, Macy's Daddy. I appreciate that. Let's see. Okay. Just want to see if we're talking about any Sandbed questions before we jump to other stuff. Vanmo has already beat us to it. He's already completed water test Saturday. Good job. Keep up the good work. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Tina, good. Thanks for mentioning that. Turkey basting off the rock work. That is another method of helping clean a tank. And what you can do is you can also use like a MaxiJet power head with like a long extension cord, and you can blow off all the rock work instead of having to squish, 1,000 times in your tank. I mean, obviously if it's a small tank, it takes you a few minutes, but if it's a bigger tank like mine or well, probably many of you, you're gonna want something that's a little bit more continuous running. And that's why I like to use a MaxiJet. And you can just blow off the rock work. You'll see all this detritus coming loose, and you can just, it's all tumbling around, and then it goes through the overflow box and goes down into the sump and gets caught in the filtration. And that's a really good, easy method that doesn't really cost you much. You probably own a MaxiJet anyway, so you can just do that. And Rafiki, Yeah, I got that right. Rafiki actually said the same thing. Use a maxi jet and a hose and blow into the sand. Oh, okay. So you're suggesting really aerating the sand bed and make it tumble. Yeah, you would definitely clean out a lot of stuff out of the base of the sand. I don't know if I'd go to that extreme, but if it's worked for you, that's great. One other thing that we could mention is that if your sand isn't white in the first place, it'll never look white. So like if you bought brown sand, for example, or you got beach sand from California, that's that brown look, that's the color you're going to get. If you use silica sand, which is used for sandblasting, some people used to do that, it doesn't look good. It actually has a gray look to it, and it'll never look nice. And it can look kind of dirty too. So I really prefer to use aragonite-based, which aragonite means calcium-based. And if you can get that type of sand, it's typically in the whiter family. It's funny too, because one of the brands that I loved using was called Fiji Pink. And yet it wasn't a pink sand bed, it was white, or whitish. So I find that those sands, it also matters what type you have to be able to acknowledge what cleanliness level you can achieve. Okay, here's another one. So using a sand sifter, that's another method that some people employ to clean their sand bed. So Tina had sand sifters that would work their way around the tank, and they would grab a mouthful of sand and then it would sift out their gills or their throat, and it would just pile up nice and clean because the fish ate all of the stuff out of the sand. Now, the problem for some people like me is if you have corals down on your sand bed, the sand sifter could just bury it under a mound of sand, and by the time you notice, you'll have a dead fungia, a dead favia, a dead acan, a dead clam. I mean, it just depends how aggressive that fish is at scooping and covering something. And sometimes it seems like the fish is intentionally trying to cover up that coral. I don't know why that happens. I've seen it happen on occasion, and you have to go in there and rescue the coral every single day, or move it to a totally different location away from the sand bed to protect it. But I was at a public aquarium in Dallas, and I watched a sand sifter get a mouthful and go all the way up to the rockwork and then try to cover a scolie. And I was like, what is going on with that fish? That is so wrong. How dare you? So I don't, I'm not a sand sifting fish guy. Also, I don't recommend sand sifting starfish inside a reef tank because they eat all the good bacteria out of your sand bed and you end up with a dead sand bed. And once you have a dead sand bed, you'll end up with all kinds of algae growing on it. I mean, literal algae. It could be hair algae growing right out of the sand. It becomes like clumpy, pasty. It's dead. So, oh yeah. So if we're trying to keep a healthy sand bed, it may be time to add some live sand to your tank from time to time to replenish what has basically died off or depleted. So something that we used to do, we would, matter of fact, I was part of a crazy mail order system, I guess you could call it. What happened is there was a thread, and we talked to each other all over the nation, and we were talking about how could we increase our biodiversity in our sand beds. And so a lot of us agreed to take a cup of sand, put it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in one of those priority mailer boxes and mail it to another hobbyist in another state to kind of cross-pollinate all the reef tanks and kind of increase your odds of having more than one type of bacteria in your sand bed. And so we did a lot of live sand sharing back then. If you have someone local in your area, you know, another hobbyist, or you can get a cup of live sand from an existing display at the fish store, you can add that to your sand bed, and it's a great way to get some new bacteria infused into your system. But we also have other options, you know, when it comes to bacteria. You got Microbacter 7, I mentioned Dr. Tim's. You've got Liverock Enhance that has bacteria in it. Trying to think what else there is. But anyway, and Perdibio. These are all bacteria you can add on a regular basis if you want to increase. One thing about sand, or like live sand, is we don't quarantine it, we don't dip it, we don't put any kind of chemicals in it. This is sort of a, if it looks good enough that you trust it, you put it in your tank. You know, if it looks horrible, if it's just disgusting, if it smells bad, then I would just toss it. I'd say, forget it, never mind. But mostly, you know, it's like you went to a friend's house, they scooped out a cup of sand into a Ziploc bag, you came home an hour later and you just added it to your tank. You would just turn off the pumps, open the Ziploc, lower it all the way down in the tank, flip it over and just pour it into a mound, and then let it sit for about 5 minutes. and then go ahead and turn the flow back on, and it'll kind of level itself out. And that's a way to add some live sand to your tank, which will help keep the sand cleaner longer. Someone asked if they could look at the anemone cube. It's blue, because it's that time of day. Don't think you're going to enjoy it. Anyway, that's the tank right now. Let's see what else. Coral lovers, I haven't used Vibrant. I've never had a need to run it, so I don't have any opinion on that one. Sorry. Will says, I'm in an Asian grocery store watching live. That's dedication. My wife can't keep me from the hobby. Nice. Are you there to get some nori and some frozen food to make your own fish food? I'm looking for questions. Okay. ClickClacks asked a question. Any tips for hard water stains on glass? I've tried everything. You know, actually, that's a question I'm asking myself. I've got a couple of spots here on the glass that are, what had happened was a coral had grown against the glass, and by the time I removed it, it left basically an impression, and I want to use something, and I don't know what I can use. I feel like I need something very fine that I can sand it with without sanding it, because I don't want to scratch the glass. So maybe someone will chime in. I do know that when we're cleaning a used tank, there's different products you can use. You can use white vinegar, you can use muriatic acid, but you might still see like a smoky white film. But once you add the water, it seems to evaporate or just, become invisible. You just don't notice it like you do in a dry tank. But I agree. I feel like someone out there on the market knows exactly how to make glass beautiful again, and we just need to find out what they do so that we can do it. You know, see if there's something we can use in our tank to actually clean off some of these spots that bother us. Another good question. So let me address the second one, Steve. He asked, what causes your sand to turn to stone? And that is a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Sometimes when we're dosing our tanks, what can happen is the additives like alkalinity will bind up in the sand bed and turn an entire section of your sand to rock. I mean, it just becomes a big, huge clump. And you reach in and you try to poke it and you're trying to stab it with your scraper and it's just hard as a stone. You might break it up. I can just tell you this for a fact. If you have any of that happen in your tank, first thing to do is to remove it. Don't try to break it down. Don't try to boil it. Don't try to save it. Throw it away. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what chemical reaction happens, but I do know that if you have a big clumped up section of sand and you finally do break it up into nuggets and stuff, things start dying in your tank. It is the weirdest thing. I really don't know. I mean, is it a sudden alkalinity spike is being released? I really don't know. But I do know the simplest solution is remove it. Just toss it out, add some more clean sand, and maybe see what else you're doing to avoid it happening twice. It's not something that happens to someone over and over and over. It's more like, oh, that's weird, my sand bed turned hard, and then you deal with it, and it never happens to you twice. It's strange, right? So I would just suggest, like I said, pry out whatever big sections you don't like, add some new clean sand. Also, if we're going to add sand to a tank, the rule of thumb is to add ½ an inch per week. Because if you put in 1 or 2 inches of sand on top of your sand bed, what you're doing is you're smothering all that little bit of life that was underneath, and it dies, which is the exact opposite of what you want in your tank. You don't want things dying and causing ammonia and nitrite. So don't smother your sand bed with a lot of sand. Instead, add a little bit each week until you get to the desired level you want or the desired height of sand bed that you want. And that way, the live stuff in the sand will migrate its way up and up and up each week, and it doesn't die. So I have an article on my website that actually shows how to add sand to a tank, and it's really simple. I turn off all the flow in the tank, I move some things out of my way, I take the bag and I clean it off on the outside completely so it doesn't have anything on it, so I feel like it's safe to put in my reef, and I cut the top of the bag, and then I take the entire bag and I put it down in my reef, and I flip it over so that the opening is way down at the sand bed, and I lift the bag up. I kind of shake it, and the sand will sift out, and you can kind of move the bag side to side and kind of get a mound, and then spread it out evenly across your reef. And that's a really easy way to add live sand to an existing reef tank, and I've done that. I used to do it twice a year on my 280-gallon reef. This tank actually could use a few bags. I'd like to get some more live sand. It's been a long time. I mean, think about it. I've had the same sand in my tank now for 6+ years, and the stuff it's aragonite based. Like I said, it's calcium based, and so deep down in the sand bed, you know, the lower levels of the lower strata, the oxygen level is lower. It actually is a lower pH down there, and it can start to dissolve away some of the sand. It seems to just evaporate, and it basically is. It's being consumed by the reef, and so by adding new sand, you're replenishing what's missing. And you're bringing, I think my tank would actually look better if I added a bunch of clean sand. So I've got a few buckets outside that I've neglected washing. I could wash that, but I'm much more apt or prone to buy live sand, like the Tropic Eden live sand, and add those to my tank to add some new bacteria. And then the other question Steve asked was, what causes brown jelly disease? I'm going to say LPS corals, because brown jelly disease kills LPS corals. What causes it, I don't know. I don't remember ever reading a source. But whenever you come across brown jelly disease, and what that is there's this gel that is brown, and it's on the coral, and the coral dies underneath it, and it migrates right across and hits the next part until it kills the whole thing. So a lot of people will take the coral, they'll frag away the part with brown jelly, and save the part that's still healthy, maybe even dip that in Revive, which is a coral wash by Two Little Fishies, and then put it back in the tank and hope it doesn't spread. It's also important, again, this is one of those things, I keep saying turn off the pumps. This is another situation where you want to turn off the pumps when you're removing something with a disease, because you don't want the flow of the water to blow that stuff off, which you're lifting out of the tank, and send it into your reef and land on everything else. So if you have a thing that's bothering you, stop the flow, reach in, maybe lower a bowl in there, put the item in the bowl, lift the bowl straight up, and then restart your pumps. And that way you don't risk repolluting or spreading it elsewhere in the tank accidentally. All right. Coral Lover says, what about moving all the sand bed every week? You can definitely stir it, but you aren't removing the problem, you know, by just moving it around. It just is a temporary feel-good measure that will last a couple of hours, and then you're going to start hating it again. If there's an actual problem, you have to solve it. The increase of flow should keep things nice and clean and essentially white. Pickle Boy says he has 2 crabs and 3 snails. Do I need to get more cleanup crew for my 29-gallon? I'd say yes. You need at least 15 more critters. Priush says, what is your opinion on crushed coral over sugar fine sand? When you use crushed coral, and I've used it in the past, the detritus that traps in crushed coral is unbelievable. And my 29-gallon used crushed coral because that's how, you know, when I was a kid and I had a saltwater tank, you start it with crushed coral. You put it on top of your undergravel filter to hide it. And oh my God, the stuff that comes out of that stuff, the crushed coral, is so bad. It's so hard to clean. You're constantly siphoning it. It's never clean enough. When I was trying to really clean the crushed coral in my 29-gallon, I used a gravel vac, and I would suck out half the water in my tank trying to clean it, and I was still not done. And I'd add more salt water to the tank, and then I would continue and drain the tank halfway. I add more water to the tank, and I'd probably change 15 gallons of water in the process trying to suck out all the stuff, and still couldn't get it all. I just got what I could get to because there's rock work in the way and there's corals. So you really only have like a perimeter that you can kind of clean, but the epicenter you can't even get near it because everything's in the way. And most people are not going to like rearrange their rock work just because they want to clean the substrate. So typically we don't use crushed coral in a reef tank. You may use that in a fish-only system because it's wide open. You just have fish swimming back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's their thing. But the finer sand is ideal. In the old days, we used something called oolitic sand, which was super fine. But the problem is it was super, super dusty. And because it was so dusty, if you just barely bumped it, it was like, poof, you have this little cloud moving through the tank. You're like, oh, I bumped the sand bed. So oolitic was considered a great method for denitrification, and it was especially recommended for deep sand beds. But it was so fine and dusty that after, well, take example me. After a few years of it, I was like, nope. And I went and got myself something that I liked better that was a little bit larger. Now my frag system has a really large, coarse grade of substrate, and it was a terrible decision. And that's one of the reasons I want to break that tank down and just start fresh and remove all that and then put in some new clean sand. And I was up at Frank's and he has some big bags of sand, and I'm thinking I'm just going to grab one of those because it's easier than washing the sand I own. I don't know. It comes down to time. I'm quickly running out of time. I've told you guys that my back's been bothering me. Today I'm actually sitting down to give my back a break. But the surgery that's coming up is scheduled right now for December 10th. And today is November 16th. And I'm leaving on the 27th for Dubai. And I'll be gone for 6 or 7 days. So I basically have like about a week of time to work on anything I want to work on. Then I go to Dubai. And then when I come back, I have exactly 1 week to accomplish anything else I want to accomplish before I go under the knife. And then after that, I picture myself being essentially useless for about 6 weeks. So I will be enjoying the holidays healing. But at the same time, it's probably a good time of year to do it. So I should also mention this, if you're buying anything from my website, I greatly appreciate it. I am not doing any kind of Black Friday sales. I am leaving on the 26th, which is 2 days before Black Friday, and I'll be gone for a week, so there's absolutely no point to even try to offer any kind of sales. The items, if you buy anything during that time or Cyber Monday or throughout the next week, as soon as I get back, those orders will go out. But I'm not going to try and run some kind of a special sale while I'm on the other side of the planet. I just don't want to take any chances and disappoint anyone. So I'm just going to recommend buy things now while you still can. And I do appreciate all the business I get from you guys. I feel like a lot of the people that buy from me are watching this channel because they will put comments in the comment field during checkout and they'll say, hey, I love your YouTube channel, or I know your back's hurting. You don't have to ship this out immediately. And I appreciate that you guys are aware of that. It's kind of cool to think I'm literally talking to my customers, because in the past, a customer was just someone that stumbled to my website and bought something. And now it's you guys. And I love that. It's pretty amazing. So thank you for supporting me in what I do and what I love. All right. Play Nice says, it looks like you had a good night's sleep and are full of energy. Pretty good night. This whole week has been working, blood work, doctors, dentists. The PT is done. But there's been just a pharmacist. I mean, all these little trips I'm doing, all these things are preparation for the big cut. And it's kind of exhausting. And I'm trying to get orders built for customers. I'm working on a big sump right now that I need to get out. And it's on the table right now. Let's see if I can turn this around for you guys and take a look. Don't look at my messy house. So there's a sump I'm working on right now. And I'm going to work on getting that finished up this weekend so they can go to the customer early next week. So that's coming up. If you have not got Disney Plus yet, what are you waiting for? I'm telling you guys, it's amazing. It is like Netflix for me, Lev. Everything I love Disney, I am a huge Disney nut. And I love so many movies that have been produced by the business that is Disney. I mean, they own Marvel, they own Star Wars, they own Pixar. Apparently they're connected to National Geographic. So Disney Plus just got released on Tuesday. I bought it Monday night because I couldn't wait. And 2 in the morning, I was able to get the app and I was watching the first episode of The Simpsons from 30 years ago on my phone before I went to sleep. I love the ability to grab whatever you want. Now, I'll tell you this, if you're a Verizon customer, you can go into the Verizon app and they will give you 1 year of Disney Plus for free. So sign up for that if you haven't done that yet. If you've already signed up, congratulations, and I look forward to seeing us talk about some of our favorite movies. This morning when I got my day started, I was watching Rogue One, Star Wars, of course, and great. I just love having that at my fingertips. I don't know what I'm going to do with regular TV now because it's so much nicer to just stream an entire show with no commercials, no breaks. I can hit pause, of course, if I need to, but other than that, it's just so much nicer than regular TV. Yvonne says, does it hurt your reef to stir up the sand bed once in a while? No, a cleansing is okay. If you're doing it once in a while, what you're doing is you're kind of kicking up all the waste, and hopefully you have enough flow in the tank to get it out, or your filtration can capture it. If it's a smaller tank, like an all-in-one tank, it probably won't be very effective because usually the flow going into the back compartment and back to the front isn't really great, as in many gallons per hour. It's relatively slow, so it doesn't make the tank look like a tornado. So if you do need to stir the sand, it's not going to hurt the tank. Typically, we kind of work on the top ½ inch of sand. We don't try to go all the way down to the bottom. And I think, like I said, I think it's a placebo effect. It makes you feel like you did something. And of course, you see the detritus coming out of the sand, but the problem is 10, 15 minutes later, it's going to land somewhere else unless it came out of the system. So if you were stirring it up during a water change and then siphoning out cloudy water, that'd be great, as long as you don't siphon out a fish accidentally. Gennaro says, how much is your maintenance per year? Like, as in, how much work do I do on my tank? Actually, the 6-year anniversary video that's coming out, hopefully tomorrow, should talk about a lot of this, but in a nutshell, I clean the protein skimmer once a week. I put carbon on my system once a month and run it for a few days. I dose Prodibio twice a month. I feed my tank every single day. I use Benareef a couple times a week. I dose a gallon of magnesium once a month. And I've done 2 water changes this year. So not a lot of maintenance. I do clean the glass about once, frequently, but about once a month I get out the Easy Blade, which is not next to me, of course. Oh, there it is. And this is also going to be in that 6-year anniversary video. So this is the Easy Blade that glues on the back of a mag float, and there's a razor blade that fits in here. And I use this on the inside of the tank on all my glass. And I love this thing. It's hard to come by. But nowadays, people are 3D printing everything. I think they could just print something like this if they just knew exactly what dimensions to make it. And it's so awesome. Of course, you need the blades too. I've found the blades on Marine Depot. I've found them on Premium Aquatics. If you shop in Dirk's reef shop, he's got the blades also. I only use a blade one time. So you have a long, flat razor blade. Hang on a second, I'm looking for it. All right, got it. So I keep it in a Ziploc bag so they don't rust while they're sitting in storage. And this is the holder, and then inside of it are these razor blades. They're a straight blade, it's about, I don't know, whatever this is, 4 inches wide. And it would just fit inside there. Anyway, I love the Easy Blade. It's fantastic. It came out many years ago, and it's my go-to tool. And I'll keep doing it until I can't use it ever again. One day I might not be able to get the blades, or one day, the thing will break, whatever. But it's a super awesome tool for me, and it lets me scrape every inch of my glass. I go into the corners. I chisel off coralline with it. It doesn't scratch my tank because it's a brand new blade. And as soon as I'm done, after I've done all the glass on the cube, I've done all the glass on the 400 gallon, then I take the blade out, I rinse it under some fresh water, I put some cooking oil on it, and I wrap it in a paper towel, and I put it in a safe spot. And then when it's time again, a month from now, I will use the opposite side of the blade that's never been used before, and I will scrape my glass. So basically I get 2 months out of each blade. That once a month cleanup is what makes my tank sparkle. And it takes a long time. It probably takes me an hour maybe, yeah, about an hour, maybe a little bit less, to cover every square inch of glass. And I really go over it meticulously. And then as soon as I'm done scraping, then I will stand right here and look at the reflection to see if I have any triangles or patches I missed. And then I'll go over there and I'll scrape again, and I'll come over here and I look. So I'm basically looking down the length of the tank to see if there's anything that I missed when I've done my cleaning. And it's a good process. If you're working on your own tank and you've cleaned the glass from the front, it's good to go to the end and look and see if you got it all, because maybe you missed some. Oh, also, a lot of people try to avoid hitting the sand bed when they're using the cleaning magnet because they're afraid the sand will get stuck in between the magnet, and then as they go back and forth, they'll scratch their tank. This is especially a problem for acrylic tanks, and so we want to avoid sanding our tanks accidentally with substrate. So whenever you have a cleaning magnet of some kind, like this one here that I use, I'm going to just kind of peel this back. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it's kind of hard to see. But there's actually all kinds of little spororbid worms that are living inside there. So I'm going to have to take this magnet out, and I'm going to have to go ahead and take a toothbrush and go to the sink and kind of clean the Velcro pad to remove anything in there that could become calcified that could scratch my glass. The tank, like I've said it repeatedly, 6 years old. There's only a handful of real scratches on there. The rest of my tank is pretty pristine. I've done a pretty good job of avoiding scratching my tank. And I'm sure one of the main reasons for that is because I'm constantly scraping with some kind of a credit card or hotel key card instead of any kind of metal on my glass. The only metal I use is that razor blade. So that's kind of my maintenance. Lastly, I didn't mention, but I also keep up with my RODI system. You know, I got to refill the reservoir under my tank once a week and make sure that both tanks are topping off properly. And so I guess that's some maintenance, but that's about it. There's not a lot more I do. So I hope that answered everything you were wanting to know. Odile, thank you for telling me how to pronounce that. That helps me a lot. Sorry for saying it wrong all this time. Fish Whistler, what are you trying to mail me? You can hit me up on Contact Us, and I will reply to you and see what's going on. Yeah, that I already answered. William asked the question, he recently saw a post about magnetic material in black Carib Sea sand. Is it safe or not? Well, I would kind of lean toward it's not. I would have to know more about that. I haven't heard about that. But black sand could be potentially magnetic because it's not really sand, it's silica glass. And there might be other things in there that don't belong. I guess you could run a magnet through the sand and pull out any kind of impurities first. But if you're pulling out all kinds of impurities, that might be a little bit concerning. I don't know enough about that one. But thanks for mentioning it. Cordell says, when should a cleanup crew be added to a new tank? I'd say around month 3. So what happens is you set up the new tank, you cycle it. That takes 3-4 weeks, right? Then you start to add some livestock to the tank, and that might be a couple of fish. And you might add some invertebrate, a feather duster. You might even want to add like a couple of hermit crabs because they're interesting and fun to watch. That's actually the first part of your cleanup crew would be those little hermit crabs you just added. But then as the tank lights are on every single day for about 9 hours or so, you're going to start to get algae growth in the tank. And so you're going to need a cleanup crew to keep up with it. And a speaker many years ago used the analogy that when you look at a field full of cows, the grass or the greenery is all very short because the cows are constantly eating it. I mean, they just literally all day long are just chewing on it to keep it nice and low. And so he was saying with that analogy that if you have problems with algae in your tank, you don't have enough cows. So have lots of cows, which is one of the reasons why I recommend so many. If you choose to use less, of course, that is totally up to you. And if you do, you will have to just see if they're keeping up. And if they're not, you need to add more. And if you've added some a long time ago and now your tank's full of algae, but you still have a lot of snails, odds are they're lazy worthless snails, and you need some new hungry ones. And when you go to the fish store to buy a new cleanup crew, usually when you look in the tank full of snails, it's all clean because all the snails have nothing to eat in that tank because it's a holding bin. It's not a reef they can snack on. So they show up to the fish store semi-starved. They get dumped into a tank, acclimated, and then they all start eating each other's the algae off their shells, and that's why all the shells are so pristine. And then you put them in your tank, and they look bone white. They look like popcorn in your tank because they are so clean, and they are ready to go. And they just start eating everything they can get their little mouths on, which is awesome. But then over time, they become lazy, and they're not doing nearly as much as you wanted. So adding a crew from time to time is really a method that is proven to work well. And if as it dwindles down and as the algae starts kicking in, you need to start thinking about beefing up the cleaning crew. But initially, I wouldn't put it in at the very beginning. It's too soon. I'd say around month 3 would be a good time. Saif says, I took a new LED fixture, and after using for 2 to 3 days, my tank's having a huge diatom bloom on the sand and the rock and the back. Yep, that's normal because you just put this new light with lots of intensity, and it is feeding anything that it can feed in that tank through photosynthesis. So kind of need to review everything else we talked about in the beginning. That's very likely. You can always reduce the lighting period that you're using now. You can even dim it down because it's LEDs. A lot of them are dimmable. You can pick a certain percentage and ramp it up as the corals need that light versus just blasting the tank with light, hoping that something will grow from it. Because that's not how we do our reef tanks. We don't just turn on the lights and wait for things to grow out of the rock. We plant some corals and we want them to grow, but you have to kind of look at what you've got in the tank and then correlate that with what kind of lighting you're going to use and how much. But I pretty much recommend most people, your lighting period should be about 9 hours a day. And a lot of people go to 12 hours a day and it's too long. It's just too long. I don't recommend it. Oh, another thing. Well, let me answer this really quick. Tina, she says, isn't silica sand bad for a tank? You'd think, but it's just glass. And your tank is made of glass. So think about that. It's actually not bad for the tank, it's just not beneficial. It doesn't do anything good for it, and it doesn't look really good either. So that's why I don't recommend it. But now, let's talk about removing a sand bed from the tank, because someone recently in Club Milo's Reef did that. He went to his tank, he was fed up with a sand bed, or I don't even know. He didn't actually say what was wrong with it, but he sucked it all out, and then his tank just started to implode. And so I wanted to talk about the process of removing sand from a reef tank that's already in existence. Like, for example, if I want to take sand out of this tank, if I want to take sand out of the anemone cube. If that's going to be the choice you want to do, don't take it all out in one day, because there's a lot of bacteria in that sand bed that is beneficial and part of your ecosystem. And as you remove it, you are removing some of your beneficial bacteria. So if you're going to remove sand from a tank, I would recommend maybe 25% per week. So that way it gives it 6-7 days to kind of recover from what you did and adjust and adapt. And then you take out another 25%. And then again, a week later, again, look at your livestock. See if everything's okay. Keep up with your water tests. And if everything's coming back good, then you can go ahead and you can switch it one more time and take out another 25%. And then finally, so it takes about a month to remove a sand bed. I would not recommend doing that in a day. The only thing you could possibly do in the same day would be if you're transferring from one tank to another and you've got this reef with sand and then you're setting up a new tank with no sand. You can take all the livestock and move it into the new tank and then deal with the sand bed away from everything to where the sand can't release anything into the water, it can't cause any decay or die off, it can't cause pollution, detritus, all that stuff is separated. But if the tank is in the way, you're going to have to remove the sand, but just don't drain it into your containers full of livestock or rock. Drain that or scoop it out into buckets or a trash can or whatever you're going to do with it, and then set up your new tank in place and put your rock in there and add your water and add your heaters and add your flow and then put your livestock in once it's safe. But that's the only way you can do it the same day. I would not recommend removing all your sand ever on a reef tank on the same day. That is interesting. V says, I had 2 tiger conchs for 2 years and added a Halloween hermit crab, and within a week both tiger conchs were dead. Oh, tiger conch. And the hermit crab was inside the shell. Well, I think you figured out who did that. That is surprising. I had a Halloween hermit crab in my tank with my tiger conch, and that didn't happen. All right. It's good to know. I'll have to keep track of that one in case something like that comes up again. Thanks for sharing your story. Nick asked the question, has anyone ever tried using an extra pump in the first section of your, or the first chamber of your skimmer? Let's see if we can specify what you're talking about. Are you saying to actually mount another pump on the side of your protein skimmer? Because that will change the fluid dynamics of the skimmer and make it operate completely differently. If you're talking about putting a power head in the section where the protein skimmer is sitting to keep detritus from settling in the bottom of the sump, yeah, some people have done that. And it is a way to kind of help keep your sump clean, because that way the stuff as it floats up will then likely be caught in some kind of filtration, the protein skimmer itself, filter floss, filter socks, something like that. That's one method. What I'm doing myself is I just have a vacuum attachment on a hose, and I will vacuum my sump out about once every couple of months until it looks essentially clean again, and then I leave it alone for a while. We are up to 216 people in here right now, guys. That's awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with us on this beautiful Saturday. Maria says, I'm changing my aquascape and I'm cycling the new aquascape in a different tank. Once the cycle is finished and I'm changing it out, then I want to clean the sand. Can I just rinse the sand clean with salt water or RODI water? Actually, you can just use a garden hose. It's going to be kind of cold this time of year. That's more like a summer project, but you can definitely wash your sand with tap water. Do not fear tap water. Tap water is not going to hurt your reef, because as you're finishing, you're going to end up with just moist sand. That's all it is. You're not taking tap water and dumping it in your aquarium. It's just a handful of sand that's wet, and you put it in the tank. You're not even going to see water collect. You know, it's just damp sand. It's just rinsed clean. That's not going to hurt your tank at all. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to worry about chloramines or chlorine or anything. You know, just rinse your sand really good, and then you're going to, you know, really the most wet part of the sand will be the bottom of the bucket or the barrel or whatever it is you mixed in. And as you scoop it out and lift it out, you know, the water's going to drip between your fingers, and you can just add that last bit in. I do want to tell you a trick that I did, because I made a huge mistake with my reef tank way back in 2011. I was being super cautious not to scratch my brand new tank as I was setting it up. And I had the idea that I would take my sand that I'd washed out and I'd put it in a bucket, and then I'd fill the bucket about halfway, which is still pretty heavy, probably 30, 40 pounds. And then I would lift the bucket up and pour the sand into my tank, and then I'd go outside and get more of the sand I'd rinsed out, put it in the bucket and bring it in. So I'm doing that, I'm putting it in. And my buddy says, oh my God, what are you doing? And I said, I'm adding sand. He goes, no, look what you're doing. The bucket had one of those metal handles, and the metal part was, sticking out a little bit. And so as I hold the bucket over and I'm pouring the sand in, the metal was grinding into my glass. And I was like, oh my God. And it was day one of the tank, and I had this horrible, ugly scratch on the front side, pretty much in main view all the time, forever, in a tank that I planned to keep for 10 years. And I was so mad at myself because it was totally my fault. If I'd used a bucket with no handle, this couldn't have happened. So when I got my tank replaced, because it leaked and then they had to rebuild it and it took forever, and my livestock sat in a different tank, then I had all that sand from the previous tank sitting outside in one of those Rubbermaid troughs. So I washed, 400 pounds of sand, I guess. And that's probably not exaggerating. It probably was 400 pounds. I washed all that sand, and then this time I said, I am not scratching my new tank. I learned a lesson from that one. I'm going to avoid taking that chance. So I grabbed those white plastic 13-gallon trash bags we use in our kitchens, and I would scoop my rinsed sand and put it in the white trash bags. Those bags are not very strong. And as you lift it, it felt like it was probably going to tear. So I'd put my arm under it. But I could take that plastic bag and I could hoist it over into the rim of the tank and down in. And then I could just flip the bag over and shake it out. And there was no chance of scratching my tank doing that. And so that was my method for putting sand in my tank the next time, rather than from a bucket, which a bucket just seems so normal. I mean, when you go to the beach to play as a kid, they hand you a shovel and a bucket. So as grown-ups, we are thinking buckets of sand, that's fine. But I scratched a beautiful, brand new, expensive tank in the first few minutes of setting it up because of a bucket with a metal handle. So heads up. If you can transfer stuff into something soft, and then, a pillowcase, and then put that in the tank and shake it out, add more and more sand, you can do that. All right. I hope that story was interesting to you. But yeah, tap water, nothing to fear. Play Nice says, on a regular basis when I'm cleaning the sand bed with siphoning, can I siphon into a filter sock rather than just into a bucket and wasting it away? Yeah, you can. You'll notice your filter sock probably, especially if you have like a second pair of eyes on it, you'll see like a brown cloud kind of coming out of the sock because it doesn't catch everything. It catches a lot of it. The sock will turn disgusting, but there will be some sediment that gets through and your water will get a little bit more murky for a few hours. You still removed a lot, and you definitely can do that. One of the tricks I did with my tank when I was trying to clean out overflow boxes that are full of detritus, I used the gravel vac siphon tube, and I put a filter sock in the neck of my protein skimmer because my skimmer was 4 inches around. So I could put the sock in there, I put the hose in there, and then I used the gravel vac and I sucked it right in, and that held my sock in place and caught everything. And anything that came out went into the protein skimmer. And then when I was done, I removed the sock, I put the cup back on top, I turned the skimmer on, and all of that moam that had been trapped in the skimmer was exported into the collection cup. So, yep, there you go. Coral lovers, congratulations on your new baby girl. Tell me you named her Cassiopeia. That's all I care about. Congratulations, that's awesome. And thanks for watching. You should be busy with your kid and your wife. Can cyano be brown? Because my sand is starting to turn brown with patches on it. It really comes down to lighting. So if you're looking at a tank under blue lights, you can't tell what color it is. I always recommend switch your lights to white and look and see what things are. The funny thing about cyanobacteria, to the rest of the planet, it's called the blue-green algae. But for us, it's red. So cyano can be blue, it can be green, or it can be red. Typically, it's not brown. But it could be a dark red that leans toward brown, and especially if your lighting is kind of in that blue phase, it's going to look kind of brown to you. But you can always take a flashlight and you can hit it and look at it with white light, or the light, the flashlight on your camera, your cell phone, and you can shine it on it and see what it looks like. But I think too many people are using blue light all the time and they're missing really important details because they're not looking at it under realistic light. So don't fear the white light. White light is not a bad thing. Reef Keeper says, I know you're against using sand sifting starfish. I'm fighting conchs. Actually, the second half, no problem with that. I don't mind fighting conchs at all. I recommend them. Sand conchs, fighting conchs, both good choices. I always get compliments or comments on how clean my sand is, and I've been doing it in my reef for 2 years and 6 months, successfully. Well, not every story is a horror story, and I'm glad it's working for you. But if you will Google what a sand sifting starfish eats, and then Google what a serpent starfish eats, you'll see why the sand sifting starfish is such a bad choice for a reef tank. They eat everything. That's their one mission in life, to eat it all. And they'll eat all your good bacteria. So I don't recommend that one in a reef tank. And if you're in a fish store with good people, good employees, they will not sell you a sand sifting starfish if it's going in a reef. If it's going in a fish-only system, it's totally fine. If it's going in a, I don't even know. I mean, I don't keep that starfish, but I'm trying to think what tanks would be good in. Might be good, well, it depends if a predator would eat it, but a predator tank, a fish-only tank, maybe a seahorse tank. I don't know if the starfish might affect or attack the seahorse. So you'd have to check, find out the facts. But yeah, I don't recommend it. I tell people never put those in a reef tank. Thomas says, do you know whether a 2-spotted goby is okay? I saw one in my local fish store, and he does not seem to carry the sand high, so he could be a safer option than another one. Well, yeah, you could try it out. You could just keep observing the one that you've seen and decide if you trust them. And you might like them. I mean, they are very entertaining fish to watch, but that's all they do all day long. It's just constantly sift sand. So, and keep in mind also what size is the tank. Oh, another great thing that I didn't even mention once, and we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes, roughly, was that a cucumber is a safer choice for eating detritus than a sand-sifting starfish. Cucumbers are mopping the surface. If you've ever watched a cucumber up close, it's pretty neat. They have about 5, I think, appendages, maybe 6. And the tip of each appendage kind of looks fuzzy, and they will put one down on the sand, and they're obviously ingesting something, and then the next one goes down, and they like lick them off. It's quite the process, and they just keep doing it over and over, but they're working certain areas, and then they poop out these little pellet-sized bits of sand, nice clean sand, and there'll be some funny-looking hill of poop pellets, but eventually the flow just dissipates it, or you can knock it over and make it smooth again. But cucumbers are a great choice for cleaning a sand bed, and they don't get everything, but they work their way everywhere over time. So they're not as destructive as a sand-sifting starfish. So that's the difference there. Hey Jay, thanks for tuning in. I know exactly where you were. You're over on Tidal Gardens live stream. Let's see. Odile, I don't sell Prodibio at this time, but the vendor has asked me to carry it. I just haven't done it. It's just another thing to add to my week. I would like to get those on my website because I've been using them for like 9 years. And it's just one of those things I've just never picked up. I need to do it. Huh. Aaron says, use a headlight cleaning pad to clean bad stains on the glass. That's interesting. I feel like most headlights are acrylic, plastic-based, polycarbonate-based, something like that. And they do have like a sanding sponge type thing you can use to kind of get rid of that yellow and make them look clear again. Huh. You'd have to use a brand new one that's never touched a car if you're going to use it in your reef tank. You probably want to make sure there's nothing on it that could pollute the water. And I would look at the grit or the grain or whatever, the sponge itself. One of the sponges that we like to use is the Magic Eraser. And I could really try and see if I can make that work on this area that bothers me, because I've got all these acans right here, and yet I'm kind of looking through this weird hazy patch right here, and on the backside it's hazy right there too. It's like the one spot where I put the acans, I can't really see them very perfectly. It's very annoying. So I might try the Magic Eraser because that's a melamine material, and it's not coarse enough to cause damage to glass. It can really remove a lot of stuff. It takes a lot of elbow grease though. Let's see. So the cerium oxide, can we use that in the salt water, or are you talking about on the outside? Or are you talking about an empty tank that's never been used before? I'm sorry, is just drained like it's in your garage and you're cleaning? You could probably scrub down the glass completely and then really rinse it well and get it ready. But for guys like me with a tank full of water and livestock and I want to clean this lower corner, I don't believe that's an option, but wouldn't it be nice if it was? Pickle Boy says, what do you feel, or how do you feel about the brittle starfish? The black ones are great. The green ones are very well-known fish eaters, and they get really big, like 18 inches across. They'll have super long arms. You drop food in the water, and they come out, and they just tumble like fireworks through your reef, and they go nuts trying to catch food, and they will catch fish. So we don't recommend green brittle starfish, but the brown ones, the black ones that you can find, they're usually smaller, and they're way friendlier to your reef, and you could get that. That would be a good one you can put in your tank. I like the serpent starfish personally, but the brittles are pretty. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate the compliment. That was a fun meetup. Eric says, I took my 6-line out of my main tank because he was picking on my Mandarin Dragonette. He has been on a separate setup for over 2 months. Do you think he's forgotten his territorial issues? You could try to add him back, but 6 lines are aggressive. They're kind of a pain in the butt. And so that's why I like to recommend the 4-line or the 6-line. I'm sorry, the 4-line and the 8-line rather than the 6. The 6, I had one in my tank. He was really pretty. His name was Spike, and yeah, he was a butt. He caused a lot of trouble in my tank. Jung, there wasn't a stream about the 6-year anniversary because I wanted you to be able to see the tank. That's why I did a lot of filming last weekend, but I have to sit at my computer and build that video, and I haven't had a chance yet. I hope to get that done in the next 24 hours. Martin, thank you for tuning in from Scotland. That's awesome. Is it a good idea to add a sand bed in a frag tank? Because I only want to have frags in the tank, maybe 1 or 2 fish. You can put sand in your frag tank if you... I personally, I like that look. And I'm not a fan of a frag tank that is just a glass box with a tray with a million holes and a bunch of plugs. It's so boring to me. It just doesn't feel natural. But it's how people grow corals. I get it. I just don't like the look myself, okay? And so what I'm planning to do when I reset my frag system is I'm going to keep rock in the background, and I'm going to put 1 tray across the front with holes, and I'm going to have sand. And if you have your power head up high, it still blows across the water, and you'll get good flow across your corals, but it won't affect your sand bed adversely. So yeah, you can do it. Some people don't want sand in there, some do. I actually like it. I think it looks better. Plus, the light bouncing off the sand reflects the underside of the corals and helps them be healthy from below too. So you don't just have growth on the top, but you retain the life on the sides of the frag too. But the frag rack itself could block some of that light. So it just depends how it all works. You know, you have to kind of look at everything. The frag trays that I build on my website that have holes, they're clear acrylic, so you would get that reflective quality to some degree. But if it's a black frag rack, for example, you probably won't get a lot of benefit from it. Just depends. Oh, thanks, Christine, for answering that question. And thank you, Martin, for the super chat. I appreciate that. El Turco asks, how often should we change aquarium water, and what is the golden ratio? I feel like we're dealing with 2 different topics here. I'm going to stick with the first half. How often should we change our water? The regular rule of thumb is to change 25% of your water once a month. A lot of people are doing automatic water changes where they use dosing pumps or pumps designed specifically for the water change principle, and they will have it change like 1 or 2 gallons every single day. And you do that times 30 days, you just changed 30 to 60 gallons on your tank. So my friend Felicia has a reef bowl that is probably 3 to 6 gallons, and she got a 4-head dosing pump, and 2 heads are being used for something, like dosing something, and then 2 heads are going to be used for automatic water changes to change water in that little tiny reef bowl once a week. And so it'll pump out, I don't know, a gallon of water and pump in a gallon of water once a week, and so she'll do 1 out of 6, that's, is that 12.5%? I don't know, but if she does it every week, she'll change 4 gallons. That's going to be 66%, I believe. 80%? I hate doing math on camera. It's the worst. I feel so on the spot. But anyway, general rule is 25% once a month. Jay says 10% per week. That's way too much. That's 40% per month. That's not needed. That is definitely something that you picked up from the freshwater side. Freshwater people change water all the time. Saltwater doesn't need it like that. Tyler, thank you very much for saying that. I feel like they're great. I try not to oversell and tell people it is the best, but you can say that as much as you want, and I will just leave it on the screen forever. I'm kidding. I'm going to take it off the screen. But thank you very much for saying that. Matter of fact, I've sold so many RODI systems and filters and membranes lately. I have enough to build 9 more systems, but I ran out of membranes. And so I've got a box coming on the way right now. Even during this live stream, there's a truck bringing a box closer to Texas with more membranes so I can knock out some more units before I go into surgery. Oh, I'm getting to the comments now about Disney Plus. Didn't we talk about that 20 minutes ago? See how long it takes me to catch up with you guys? Hey, I like being life-size. Dylan says, I found a baby strawberry anemone hitchhiker on my live rock. Any experience with these? Are they super aggressive or relatively safe? Actually, it's kind of weird that you found one because they're a cold water anemone and probably won't live long in our tanks, which are tropical water. You know, they're 77 to 79 degrees. Those guys are strawberry anemones, I believe, hail from the West Coast. A lot of them exist around Catalina Island. That water is low 70s, possibly 60s. Depends how deep. I've seen them in tanks that are really cold, that are around 55 degrees. So if you found one, that's awesome. Maybe what you found was an orange ball anemone. And I have that on my Critter ID section under the anemones, and you can check it out. The orange ball anemones are not pests. They're pretty. They tend to be visible at night or on the underside of your rockwork. They don't tend to bother things like corals or other thing else in your tank. Zoanthids, they'll all be fine. I've had them mingling in my system for a long time. I enjoy them a lot. But a strawberry would be amazing if you had that, but you might not have a strawberry. And like I said, it probably won't live very long. Is it necessary to set up an ozonizer? What are the pros and the cons? An ozonizer, or to run ozone on your tank, would be a way to make the water more clear and to make your skimmer more effective. The thing is, your protein skimmer has to be built for ozone. If it's not the right material, it'll actually, the reactor will start to craze and crack because the extruded acrylic can't handle it. It has to be cast acrylic. So let's just say you have the right protein skimmer that can handle it. It needs to have a way to pump the ozone straight into the protein skimmer to add that third molecule of oxygen. The other thing is that the air coming out of your skimmer could have ozone in it, and you don't want to be breathing that. So your skimmer probably has holes in the top, so someone will put some kind of a collar filled with carbon to help capture the ozone as it comes out. So because of those basic things, I just don't even bother with it. I don't find the need. I think that if push comes to shove, rather than running ozone, I would say buy a tank that has Starfire glass, because the Starfire glass is so clear and so beautiful. It looks like you're running ozone without having to run ozone. Mirror Reef asks, do you siphon the sand? I don't. How do you attach a Gorgonian frag to a piece of rock? There's a couple of methods. First of all, you could drill a small hole in the rock And then the Gorgonian, you can kind of scrape off some of the tissue from the bottom inch, so it's just like the stick, which is the core of the Gorgonian, and you can put that in the hole, and you can add super glue gel, or you can use putty, and you can hold it there. Another method is to put the Gorgonian against a rock and use a rubber band to hold it on and leave it there for a few weeks. And after a few weeks, the Gorgonian will have glued itself to the rock with its own living tissue, and you can just snip off the rubber band and the coral would stay. This right here is a huge Gorgonian behind me. And I did that I think I used a zip tie to hold it onto the rock years ago, and it's held onto that rock ever since. It's completely grown over it. It's pretty great. But it was a very simple thing. Kenneth says, how can I maintain my sand bed in place in a high flow tank? Rearrange the way your pumps are moving the water through the tank. That's the trick. We want to find a way to have nice chaotic flow but not bother the sand bed. And you'll have to look at it. You'll have to see what you can do and how you can do it, which way you can move the flow so that your sand bed stays where you like it. Risky Biscuits, great name, says, how do the low light ramp up count toward the 9-hour photo period, or is that only when the lights are on at max? Yeah, I mean, if you want to have a dusk, or I'm sorry, a dawn full light dusk period, you can add that hour to the beginning and the end to get that ramp up and the ramp down, and that makes your photo period a little bit longer, which would be nice. My tank gets metal halide from 1 o'clock to 9:30, so that is 8.5 hours. And my XHOs, which is the blue lights that replace my VHOs, those come on at 11:30 and they're off by 10:30. So technically that's 11 hours, but that's just a blue glow. It's not like cooking my reef. It's not fueling algae growth. It's not causing anything. It's just I get that couple hours in the morning before the metal halides start, and so when I get up, I'm making coffee, and shortly thereafter, I get to see my tank for a couple hours before the meta halides turn on and turn it all white. So it's kind of pretty. And then by 9:30, the metal halides turn off, and I'm down to just blue light for the next hour and a half or so. And during that period is usually when I feed my fish. So, and then it goes dark, and it's pitch dark all night long. Except if I'm in the living room working, then they're all watching me work until I turn off the lights, and then it's pitch dark all night long. Luke says, what corals would be good to place on the sand bed? Hammers, other LPS? Yes. Lots of LPS corals work great on the sand bed. Clams are okay on the sand bed. Fungias, which is an LPS, are good on the sand bed. Acans are good on the sand bed. The only reason you may be concerned about having them down on the sand is going to be because something might knock it over and get it buried in the sand to where it kills it. So you could have a fungia flip over, and then when you finally pull it out of the sand, half of it's dead. Or you could have an acan fall over and some of the polyps die. They basically smother under the skeleton because you didn't flip it right back up again. So that's why sometimes it's nice to take some kind of a flat rock and really press it down into the sand. So it's mostly sandy, but it's really rock right there, and you can mount your corals on the rock that's essentially hidden, and it stays safe. Now, if you have sand sifting gobies that are going to cover your stuff over, all bets are off. You might lose those corals. But if you're not doing that kind of fish, then essentially that is a good method. I was thinking about getting a flat rock to put in this area here to lift these acans up a little bit, a couple inches. But for now, it actually looks good. The benefit of having a solid surface for those LPS corals connected is as they grow and become larger, they have something solid to grow on to spread out more easily. I love looking at top-down pictures of acan colonies that are just like blankets of them just all together. It's amazing, a mirage of, or a myriad of colors all smashed together. It just looks like a continuous blanket of different coral polyps. I love that look. And I don't think it's just on raw sand. I think they've got a solid surface right under that patch. I think that would be a good method. Let's see. We're going to have to wrap up soon because I'm starving and I have to hang up. But I'm going to dinner, so maybe I shouldn't eat. Oh, decisions. It's so hard. Tonight is steak night. I'm definitely going to have a nice steak. Let's see. L. Jade C, thank you for being a follower, and I appreciate that. From Atlanta, is Preservation Reef a fish store? I'd love to know. I've been to Atlanta many times. I love the Georgia Aquarium. And thanks for following this channel. Aaron says, beautiful Saturday. It's freezing and windy. All right, to be fair, I'm looking outside. The sun is shining. The sky is not really blue, but it is 63 degrees right now. A few days ago, it was freezing cold, like in the 20s. And this is Texas. You know, we're lower. You know, the guys up north, they really get hit with winter. We get 1 inch of snow one day a year, and it's gone in a matter of hours. So yeah, it's a beautiful day over here. And you know, for those of you that live somewhere where it's cold and windy and snowy, I have 3 things you need to do. You need to get hot chocolate, you need to make sure you have the internet connection, and you need to have a fireplace. And if you have those 3 things, you're set. You should be a happy camper. You can just do that for months. That's what I would do. Cool guy, Simon. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. We do try to keep the topics interesting and interesting and share different nuggets of truth, little tidbits that you're like, oh my God, that totally makes sense. I wish, you know, because I can't cover everything, but as the questions come up, the stories happen and I start recalling stuff for you guys. And Blake, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, I'm trying to help you guys so that you can be successful and have beautiful reef tanks too. Naked Reefer asks, any idea how much time Carib Sea Life Rock will last in a box? I overbought and I have about 20 pounds left over. The Life Rock is dry, correct? I mean, that's the only kind I've seen. If you have any rock that's left over of any kind, I would suggest you put it in a barrel of salt water with a big pump, like a mag pump, and just let it circulate and ignore it. Just let it circulate, put the lid on top upside down so it's like, you know, because like a lot of trash can lids are like this. So flip it over so it domes down, and as condensation happens, it just drips right down. You don't have to top off. You can just ignore it and just let it sit there. If you want to add a little bacteria once in a blue moon, you could. If you want to change water once in a while, you could. It's a great way to cook your live rock and get ready for when you want to put rock in your tank. So yeah, anytime you have that. But if it's just dry rock, I don't know that it can go bad, because I'm pretty sure the life rock is coated with stuff that's hibernating. And once water is added, it encourages them to wake up and to blossom. And I'm using all the wrong terminology because I don't sell life rock. But I think that's what it is. I think they've infused it with stuff and it just sits there dormant. That's one of the words I was looking for. And then once it's submerged in water, then it activates. Just like raising brine shrimp. You know, we have dried little eggs in a coffee can that's sealed. You cut open the can, you take a scoop out, you put it in some water with an air stone, and all of a sudden there's brine shrimp flying all over the place. You're like, wow, that came from a hard little shell, you know? I don't know if this has been answered yet, but Pickle Boy, if you go to my website, you can go melosreef.com/CUC, and that means cleanup crew. And it will give you an example of a lot of things I recommend for the cleanup crew. It's a good article. I don't sell cleanup crews, but I'm just telling you that's the reference you're looking for. melosreef.com/CUC. Let's see. El Turco asks, should we use UV 24/7 or with regular time intervals? UV is another one of those things that I don't use in a reef tank. I know some people like to use them. There's a couple of downsides to UV. Number one, it's to kill any kind of bacteria that crosses the UV bulb, right? So good bacteria goes across and dies. Bad bacteria goes across and dies. It doesn't know the difference. So that's kind of a downside to me. There is the fact that the UV bulb is hot, so it's adding heat to the water, which in effect could cause your tank to run a little warm and you're having to run a chiller to combat the UV. And thirdly, someone mentioned when we were talking about UVs a few streams ago, you have to change the bulb twice a year. So you've got the constant cost of replacing bulbs. So these are some of the reasons I don't really recommend a UV. And I suggest to people, if you're going to do it, then use it on a quarantine tank or a hospital tank, because that is where most of the things you don't want in your tank are going to start to come from in the first place. So if you get new fish or new corals, you put them in a quarantine tank, the UV can work its magic on that water and kill off some of the things you don't like. If you have to run a UV on your tank, your main display, it could be because you're trying to kill off something like dinoflagellates, some kind of free swimming bad guy. That could potentially help. It can also help kill off a bacterial bloom in the tank. It can get rid of algae spores in the water, that we always hear people talk about. It's not going to kill bubble algae unless the bubble algae blows straight across through the UV and goes across the bulb. So that's what I'm saying. It's not a cure-all. It's sort of like another gizmo. And I've never had to run one on any of my tanks, and I've been in this hobby since '97. Lamont, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And I think this is a super chat too. Thank you very much, Jade. This one I already answered, Dave. You probably typed it while I was talking about it, possibly, or maybe you weren't caught up in the stream. But basically, do not remove all your sand at once. I would recommend 25% of it once a week for 4 weeks. Oh, maybe, no, you were asking the question. Anyway, that's the answer. That's the short answer. Bill says, should I have a cleanup crew in my sump? No. A lot of people say, oh, that guy's bad, put him in your sump. And I'm thinking, what's it going to do in the sump? Can you imagine living the rest of your existence in the sewers? So yeah, if you have a crab that's problematic, I understand the premise, get it out of your tank, but maybe bring him to the fish store and let them sell it to someone else that needs it, or can feed it to a predator fish. But just to have things down there and hope they will eat detritus is kind of optimistic, and it's kind of a little depressing. You could possibly put some of those crabs that you don't trust inside the refugium. You could put snails inside a refugium to help clean the glass. They won't be super effective, but they can help a little bit. So there is that. But no, we don't intentionally put cleanup crews in our sump. We put them in the display tank because it's all about the display. We care about what happens there. A lot of people have hideous sumps, and the top is gorgeous. And that's why they have cabinets to hide the sump, because it's not pretty. But personally, I like to have a nice clean sump. I like it to look nice. Mine's wide open. I have no woodwork around my tank. And I enjoy being able to look at everything and see how everything's doing all the time. So. Clint says, can too many pods be a bad thing? Seems like they're keeping polyps from opening up and eating. Man, my nose is itching today. The abundance of pods could be a lack of predation. It could be that your tank has so much food available that the pods are growing in abundance to where there's too many. You may need to add something to your tank that eats pods to kind of get them under control so that they're not irritating or bothering some of the corals, such as zoanthids. And so I would suggest perhaps using a yellow chorus wrasse would be a good one. Get a little tiny one. They're super cute. And they'll eat some of your pods and they'll grow. It'll become bigger. It'll be a nice big yellow fish. Has a couple black dots on its back. It's really pretty. They have like green around their cheeks, like green stripes. And there's also a white belly yellow chorus wrasse called the lemon meringue wrasse. And both are really pretty. Just so you know, some wrasses will eat snails. So if they see the opportunity, they'll hit it and they'll get a meal. I remember one time I was looking in my tank with a guest, and he says, "You have a yellow chorus wrasse?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Those things eat snails." I was like, "No, it doesn't." And right in front of us, it went pow, and the snail hit the sand, and then pow. And I was like, I was wrong. And it ate the snail, and that was that. But it wasn't like it was eating all the snails. I think it was a moment of opportunity, or it just was hungry, or it was pissed off at the snail. Who knows what. But yeah, so it is possible to lose some snails to wrasses. Diacanthus Reef says, I enjoy listening to Than and Mark at the same time. Got one in each ear. That's pretty impressive, actually. I don't know that I could do that. Tyrone says, I remember you saying something about spaghetti worms being bad if you have a clam. Some people say they're good for cleaning your sandbed. So I like spaghetti worms, and they may irritate a clam just because you got these weird tendrils touching you. That could cause some reaction from the clam. You can always relocate a spaghetti worm. They have a little body, and you can just like grab it with tweezers and put it somewhere else and go on with your life. If you have thousands and thousands of them, it could become problematic. Most of us have just a few. My tank has some. Haven't seen any in a while, but I bet there's some in there. I've been noticing aptasia more than spaghetti worms, but I've seen more in the past. Okay, cool guy, I'll get it done. I'll talk to them this week. Mermaid's Reef makes a good suggestion. So the magic eraser, it's kind of a white brick. It looks like the size of a sponge. If you take a razor blade, you can cut a thin, slice, like a slice of cheese, thin, and then you can put that between your cleaning magnets on the inside of the tank, even the outside of the tank, and you can polish the glass or polish the acrylic that way, and then peel it off, throw it away, and take the next slice. So one magic eraser can potentially be used 4 or 5 times before it's completely used up. So that's kind of a nice method because it's kind of wide. It might be too wide to take power magnets and press them together, but making a thin sheet that fits on there like a sheet of felt or a little bit thicker, that would work out really well and help polish the glass. So thanks for suggesting that. Big Puff Bubbles just got here. You are super late. I think tile starfish are just pretty to look at. I don't know that they're going to do any kind of cleaning for you, or I think they're just fun. Also, biscuit starfish are really pretty too. There's a lot of starfish out there that are nice. Phromias are nice. Lynchias are nice. I haven't kept a Lynchia in forever. They don't live long term. This tank might be able to support one, but they need a lot of film algae, and typically our tanks don't have nearly enough in there to keep that starfish fed to live long term. Mitch, thanks for tuning in from Louisiana. I'm about to place an order from Coral View. Did you know they're in Louisiana? Evan, you need to listen to the beginning part of this live stream. Cool guy says, I have yet to hear a good story about any 6-line wrasse. LOL. You are so right. Mr. Reefbuster says, is it true that designer hybrid clowns don't host in anemones or don't live in anemones? And or are there exceptions? A lot of them do. Some may not realize that's their home, but eventually they will. The clowns in this tank were tank raised. They weren't designer, I don't think. They were called mocha clownfish. But I've seen all kinds of different ones that ORA breeds, and I've got a friend with an anemone cube as well, and his rose anemone is filled with all these little clownfish, and it's really pretty. You're very welcome, David. Mirror Reef says, how often do you siphon your sand bed? Never. If you do you do it all at once or a bit at a time? And then if not, how do you keep it clean? Well, that was the whole part of this live stream. So good flow, good cleanup crew, good water parameters, no diseases. That's how I keep my sand bed looking nice. I know that was really simplified, but that saved you 30 minutes of the first half of this video. But that is how I keep it clean. If I wanted to siphon some sand bed, I would work on it systematically. And so, for example, I really want to siphon the anemone cube. This sand bed is about this deep. There's been, 18 fish in that tank at any given time. And I just feel like that sand bed is full of detritus. And I'd like to give it a good siphoning for once. Just really remove a bunch and then replenish whatever I sucked out in sand, detritus and water with new salt water. Moshi, I don't know what you're asking. Are you talking about filtering your water change water to reuse it? I wouldn't do that. Zach, I'm sorry. That's been a back burner video for a long time. Apologize. Should never have mentioned it. One day I'll get around to it. Thomas says, an additional question about the two-spotted goby. I mentioned tank size. Yeah, I mean, some people have like an all-in-one tank that's 16 gallons or 8 gallons or 29 gallons, and that limits how much sand there's even for the fish to work with. With your tank being a 90-gallon aquarium, that shouldn't be a problem at all. Your fish should be fine with plenty of sand to work with. Dave Randall says, I started with 2 bubble tip rose anemones, and they've produced over 50. Wow, congratulations. I find that when people are not, when their aquarium water isn't super stable, they end up with a lot more anemones. They just seem to trigger a lot of splitting. And I try to keep my water as stable as possible. I get maybe 1 extra rose anemone once a year. And I get a lot of the green ones, but that's just what the green ones do. The little ones are, on this right here, let me switch cameras for a second. Turn this around. Let's see, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So on this one here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. There's 5 and 6 on my cleaning magnet. And then 7, 8 right here. That's just the little tiny green bubble tips. And then on the front, there's another 6 or so on the glass. And then there's quite a few in the middle, and there's a whole bunch at the top near the log line. You're going to see a lot of this in the 6-year anniversary video. But those tend to split because that's their nature. And it's just a matter of that one you can't control. It's sort of like trying to control how often an Aptasia splits, But bubble tips in general don't split a lot if the water is super stable. If they're getting a lot of water changes, if they're getting a lot of food, if the parameters swing or the temperature of the water is different on a regular basis, like week after week, it's a big water change. There was a guy down in 45 minutes away from me in Granbury, and he grew hundreds of anemones, and he was doing these monster water changes, and they would just split. And he thought that's a great thing. And he put his kid through college selling those things. And it's a true story. But when you set up a tank and keep it super stable, I find that the splitting comes almost all to a stop, and you can just enjoy the livestock you have. So it really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. Lamont says, I have a Cali frag that's been in my tank, a Cali blue tort, or Cali tort, that's been in my tank for 6 months, but it's not growing that fast. It's getting great flow and highlighting. Any suggestions? I also have a big Monty cab that's doing great. All right, so my question is going to be, how much white light are you using on that light fixture of yours? Because odds are you're loving the blue. And your coral needs white light to grow faster. Blue light grows corals very, very slowly. White light grows corals. So it's a proven fact. I kind of got in a slight disagreement with someone recently in the saltwater group where the guy said the oceans are blue, everything's blue, why would you ever use white light? Like the sun? And he thinks I'm nuts. I'm like, all right, fine. There's lots of documentation that shows that 6,500 Kelvin will really grow corals well. It's not pretty, but it'll grow them. And we like to have 10,000 Kelvin, which is 10K lighting. And then you go into the deep blues, and that's 20K or beyond. And that's where you get the color, but you get slower growth. So if your coral isn't growing very quickly, it could be it's not getting enough white light. Another thing is it could have a pest like red bugs. Red bugs like to live on tort corals, and as they bite the coral refuses to grow because it's too busy itching, and it can't scratch itself. So you have to get rid of the pest that's in the tank. But those are the couple things I would think of to maybe get your coral growing. Do you have to adjust your lighting schedule when we have a daylight savings time, or do you just leave it as is? All of my stuff is tied into the Apex and EcoSmart Live, and because of that, they just know when time changes, and the clocks all adjust on my equipment automatically and then switch back. Ironically, on my brand new Tundra, I could not get the clock to change on my radio to save my life, so I'm sitting there in my car with my iPhone and I'm Googling, how do you change the clock in your Tundra? And it said, go into settings, and I was like, that's where I was. And I'm looking at it, and it shows daylight savings time with a check mark. And I was like, so why is it an hour off? And then I decided, well, I'll uncheck it. And as soon as I unchecked it, the clock corrected. And I thought, are you kidding me? Twice a year I have to enable or disable a check mark? I would think that it was like, if you choose daylight savings time, then it knows to do that adjustment, and it'll know, because these things are all tied to the internet these days. Your clock connects to some brain on the planet that tells it what time it is, what the temperature is, what the traffic is. How on earth does it not know what the real time is where I am? That's insane. But I figured out how to change it, but what a pain. Matthew says, are you still zapping Aptasia with a laser? I've been using Aptasia X, but the little critters keep coming back with a vengeance. No, I haven't used a laser in a long time, and I do have quite a few Aptasia in here right now. But I just haven't felt like dealing with it. Luke says, how do you like the Nero 5 pump? Thinking about getting 2 for a 100-gallon mixed reef. I love it. I think it's a great little pump. I recently had it making some noise, which caught my attention. So I took it apart and I cleaned it and I put it together and it became quiet again. But I've been running it now for about a year and a half. And it's worked great. I don't know the longevity of them. I don't know how long it's going to last me. But if it were to die, I'd replace it with another one. I do like that pump. And I use the 3D printed snail guard that keeps fish and snails off the back side of my pump, and that's worked out really well. I sell those on my website. Max says, do you have any tips for reattaching Recordia to a small rock? I have a Recordia that just unattached from the frag plug. You could use fishing line, and you could wrap it around it and a rock and tie it, which would, don't tie it so tight that it just cuts the mushroom in half, but you want to hold it down. You can use netting, like some berries or grapes come in like a mesh bag, and you could cut some of that fabric and wrap it around to kind of allow light to get into it, but the netting kind of holds the Recordia in place. You can set it in a small dish with some sand or crushed coral or gravel bits, and put that in the bottom of your tank and let the Recordia grow onto those little bits of sand and little bits of rock, and then take that piece out of the bowl and glue that rock to the rock work, and now you've got the Recordia where you want it. Those are some of the tricks that work. Damien says, how is your inventory on rimless peacemakers looking for the holidays? Or I'm looking to get one for the holidays. I got to make some more. So I've got one customer waiting for his, and I'll probably cut out several at the same time so I can make a few more. And that way you can get one before the holidays and before I have my surgery. Natal says, my granny used to say that an itchy nose means you're going to get in a fight with someone. Let's hope not. I hope your granny is wrong. Jay says it's nose hair problems I need to correct. RD1 says, what size tank do you recommend for a beginner? That's such a wide open question. I would say, how much space do you have? And what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? What kind of livestock do you want to keep? Because all of those things come into play. If you were saying, I really love tangs, or I want a shark, then you're going to need a long tank that's 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet long, for example. If you're wanting to have clownfish and daisy polyps and a sea apple, you can do it in a little tiny all-in-one tank. You can do it in something that's 13 gallons or 29 gallons. If you're wanting to have a little reef, a 40-gallon breeder might be a nice thing that takes about 36 inches of space. One of the sizes that we used to promote regularly in our club to our club members when they joined, when they were shopping for tanks, we told them to get a 120-gallon tank, which was a 4-foot long by 2-foot wide by 2-foot deep tank. And that was very popular because it gave you that front to back space to really have an aquascape and have a lot of open sand in the front. And that's a nice size. It doesn't take over an entire room, but it's big. And it also, the benefit of the larger water volume is the water tends to be more stable versus a smaller tank where water parameters can shift more quickly. So like I said, it depends on the kind of livestock and what your goals are. But I hope that helped. Reef King says, did I miss too much of this show? Yes, you did. Ernest says, should you use a turkey baster to keep the sand looking clean? According to Dwayne, the answer is yes. I haven't done it. Odile says, you use something to clean your rock. What did you use? Live Rock Enhance. It's on my website. And it's an easy to use. You just literally put the powder right in the tank. You don't have to pre-mix it. You just dump it on the surface of the water. 1 scoop per 25 gallons. And you do that every couple of days. The first week you do it 3 times a week, and then after that twice a week. And you do that for a few weeks, and you're going to see your rock looks a lot cleaner. It's really neat. Keith says, any opinions on Real Reef? Real Reef rock is really pretty. I actually like it. And for my client, I'm hoping to get that rock for his tank. We're going to need a lot of it. The tank is 16 feet long. And Real Reef rock is really pretty. I really like the branching Tonga looking stuff because I feel like you can interlock it all the way across and it kind of looks like a big long bird's nest. David, I'm so glad that it's working out for you. I'm sorry it took so long to get that built. I apologize. Those items are tricky to build, and and with all the problems going on with my back and everything that was happening, you got bumped way too long, and I apologize. But thanks for being a good sport and putting up with my delays. Lamont, thank you for the super chat. Jay, what are we talking about? If we're talking about how much white vinegar to add, you better look that up. I'm not going to give that suggestion online. It's too easy to make a mistake that way. Marcus says, how long can leather corals shed for? I've had one for about a year, and usually it lasts a few days. I'm currently on day 10, starting to get worried. Yeah, I'd say about now it's done. 10 days is a long time. I was going to say they tend to shed every few weeks. So maybe take a turkey baster to it and blow it off, or a soft toothbrush and brush it off, or change the direction of the flow in the tank to kind of help rinse it clean. Also run some fresh carbon in a reactor because leathers shed and their toxicities in the water, and using the carbon will help purify the water or clarify the water and polish the water, and it'll be good for that leather. 10 days seems like a long time. I think you're going to have to intercede a little bit yourself manually. Hello, Rookie Reefer. RD1 says, how do I get my anemone to get big? First of all, how small is it? I'm sorry, it seems like a lot of times you guys ask a question and I ask you a question right back. I notice a lot of people sell small little ones, you know, the size of a quarter. It blows me away because back in the day, we'd get them, they'd be 4 or 5 inches across. They'd be nice size, and you put in the tank and it was pretty, and then you put a clownfish in and it went into it. And now you've got an anemone this size with a clownfish this big on top. It's crazy. It doesn't, it's like, how could that creature ever grow? The way to make them larger is to feed them. I would feed them something very small. It could be some kind of a meaty food like krill. Nothing the size bigger than a lima bean. Keep it very, very small. People do things like they'll take a silverside fish and they put it in, and of course the fish, the food goes into the mouth and the tail is hanging out because it can't absorb the whole thing, and then finally just spits out half the thing. If an anemone is spitting out any kind of food, if you're finding poop in your tank, you know, expelled food, it was too much food. It was too much for that creature to absorb. So that's why I say keep the food really small. I never see waste come out of any of mine, ever. Shaz says, is it okay to move sand to a new tank? Yes, you can. I just recommend that if it's less than 3 months old, you can move it. If it's over 3 months old, I would wash it or rinse it out really well and then put it in the new tank. John says, I have a 75-gallon mixed reef that has a clown, a zebra, a goby, a scooter blenny, and a watchman goby. I'm having a hard time quarantining and then introducing small tanks to help with algae. Any advice? What's the challenge? The quarantining process itself, or introducing a new fish that ends up being attacked by all the other guys that are regulars? If your problem is that they're attacking your new guy, then you really need something like I sell, which is the Peacemaker, which is an acrylic box with a bunch of holes drilled in it, and you put the new fish in there for 3 days where they can see it but they can't touch it. And after 3 days, you can open the box and pour it into the reef, and there's no aggression. But if it's some other reason, like they're just not surviving quarantine, maybe your quarantine tank is too small. Tangs can be in a small quarantine tank for a few weeks to observe that they're healthy and ick-free. I like to use Safety Stop myself, which is a rapid quarantine fish bath that is 2 45-minute sessions before it goes in my tank. But I get the fish, I acclimate it, it goes into Safety Stop Part A, then it goes into Safety Stop Part B, and then it goes into the Peacemaker for a few days, and then it goes in the reef. GMAX says, where's the beer? I'm going to have some tonight. But not today. Not at the moment. I got to drive almost an hour to dinner, so. Let's see. Gabe's Reef Tampa says that he uses 2 different products, Vibrant and Live Rock Enhance, and finds that that is fantastic. So there you go, guys. Someone else that likes these products. All right, let me pull this up really quick. So this is Live Rock Enhance. And I'll just throw on the screen for you real quick. It's this product right here that I saw on my website. It's in the dry goods section. And it's a small little jar, a couple ounces of powder in there. And it will, I can ship it for $6. My website will charge you more. I'll just refund you the difference. Dark Horse says, can you come to Connecticut and set up a 125-gallon reef tank for us? No. I mean, yes, but no. I'd rather not. I'd like to give my back a break. But sounds like a great project. There's some good fish stores up there in Connecticut. I'm sure somebody's up there that can help you out. Luke says, do you have any experience with the Reef Octopus Regal skimmers? Thinking about getting one for my 100-gallon tank. I've used Reef Octopus a couple times, and it does the job. It's affordable. A lot of people like it. And if you need replacement pumps or parts, that is available through CoralView. So yeah, if you want to get one, you can. I find they're not as quiet as I want them to be. I'm completely sold on the Nios skimmers, which is why I sell them on my website, because I use them myself. But other than that, yeah, a lot of people have Reef Octopus skimmers. And I believe they came up with a new one called Octo. I think it's the same brand, but maybe it's a separate brand. I mean, same umbrella, separate line in their arsenal of skimmers. The Octos are really pretty, but I haven't heard one. I don't know what they sound like. Junior Boy says, I finally made it! 2 hours and 16 minutes late. Where have you been? Gino says, is Spectrum more important than PAR? Getting more into SPS and thinking about going T5 LED hybrid. Can't choose between Kessel, Radeon, or the new Hydras with supplements with T5s. Well, PAR is important, and you need a certain amount to make SPS corals happy, and you said specifically that's what you're looking at. The T5s will definitely help tackle what you're needing in getting good light spread. The LEDs will give you the punch you need, and they don't add heat to the water. They don't use a lot of electricity, so that part's beneficial. But you're looking at probably wanting 300 to 500 PAR for the SPS corals, maybe even higher. Way down at the sand, you'll probably be measuring somewhere around 100 to 150 PAR. It depends on the height of the tank. The taller the tank, the more quickly the PAR drops off. If it's a shallow little tank, it's going to punch right through and cook everything. So you got to make sure you're not overdoing it. And if you own a PAR meter, that'll help. But spectrum is so important too, because running blue lights at 100% isn't going to make them grow faster. It's just more blue. The white light is what I was talking about, is so important to have at least part of your day. I like to recommend that you run the white lights during the daytime while you're at work and you don't see the tank, since that's not your preferred color. When I went to visit Tapio in San Diego, he has an entire reef tank that only uses 10K lighting every single day. There's no blue light on his tank, and his tank's gorgeous. And everything looks healthy and beautiful, and I filmed it. It's another one of those videos I need to get out. But it's something for you to look forward to. It's really nice, and do not fear white light. White light is not bad for your tank. Jay, you're not allowed to swim in my tank. You might break my corals. Do you have any tips to decrease humidity in the living room where my reef is? Maybe put glass lids on the top of the tank. That's not going to help with humidity. What will help is a dehumidifier. And I actually run one here in my living room. It's actually right under this spot right now. And it's, in the summer, I have to empty it twice a day. And in the winter, we're not quite there yet, but in the winter, I can go a week or two between emptying it out. It just cycles on and off as needed. I have it set to a certain percentage. It's actually set really low right now, like 45%, which is too low, but it's nice. It makes the room not feel chilly or clammy. So running a dehumidifier is important. It also adds some heat. So what I like to do, especially in the summer, I like to make sure I turn it on right as I'm going to bed, so it runs all night while I'm not near it. So I don't have to hear it. I don't have to feel the warmth. I can be in my cool bedroom. But then when I get up in the morning, it's probably already full and turned off. But now this time of year, it's just been cycling on and off. I actually physically turned it off so it wouldn't come on during the stream and make noise in the background. Sovsborg says, bristleworms or no bristleworms? Why are you yelling, man? Bristleworms are fine. If you have too many, it could be a problem, but it's something that can be controlled with other fish. Like a long-nosed hawkfish will eat them, arrow crabs will eat them, but having some in your tank is fine. And they are eating decay, they're eating detritus, they are going through your rocks, they are crawling through corals. They're fine. I have some in my tank and I don't worry about it at all. By the way, sorry for yelling at you guys. I just wanted to be funny. Thomas says, what is your opinion on running kalkwasser in order to raise pH? I am on 8.1 during the day and 8 to 7.9 at night. Would you try to solve this or leave it? Skimmer line is outside, is done. The refugium is done. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would leave it. It's fine. 7.9 to 8.1 each day is perfectly fine. My tank runs somewhere around that, or 8 to 8.2. It's something like that. If you wanted to do kalkwasser, you would dose it at night. I would recommend you mix up a gallon at a time and hook it up to a doser where it can trickle in quietly. I wouldn't hook it up to my top off because I don't want to have unlimited amount of kalkwasser hitting my tank. It's messy. You don't want the sediment in your system. You don't want the skin on the top in your system. It's kind of a pain in the butt. But your numbers are not concerning. If your numbers were like 7.5 to 7.7, I would say, okay, yeah. But 7.9 to 8.1, perfectly healthy. In the summer, when you get some more fresh air in your house, the number will be up even higher. But I don't think you need it. Jade says, do you recommend copper for quarantining? I don't. When I quarantine a fish, when I do it, I like to just put them in for observation and I feed them. And I feed. And that's about as far as it goes. I'm not a fish disease person. I'm terrible at it. I don't recommend any information because I don't know anything. I point everyone to someone else when it comes to fish disease. So there are quite a few people out there that know a ton more than I do on that regard, and they can answer your question. But that's all I got for you. Cordell says, what are your thoughts on live ocean rock? I love it. I love live rock from the ocean. It's the best. And there's a company in Florida that sells it. And they will even ship it overnight in water on an airplane if you pay for the cargo. And I just found this out about a month and a half ago. I was shocked because I thought that was gone. I thought we're down to just dry rock. That's all I see everyone using. And to find out that there's a company out there that actually puts rock in the ocean and gets it covered in all kinds of sponges and tunicates and worms and feather dusters and shrimps and God knows what, I am all in. I love it. I just want to order some just to have some. And I probably will next spring. I'll probably get some because I'd love some new biodiversity from the ocean in my tank. Eric asks, has anyone found a spectrometer that is hobby priced? Spectrometer for measuring water parameters? Maybe someone will answer you. No Crown Royal tonight. I mean, who knows? It could happen. But I have to drive home an hour too. I'm not supposed to drink and drive, right? Isn't that what they say? If you could house and find any marine animal or coral, fish, or anything, what would it be? You mean like if I had a sky's the limit, anything I want to do? I would like to do a cold water tank or a cool water tank and try some new species. I'd also love to get a peppermint angelfish or 3. But I would have to have someone else writing the checks for that one because that's crazy expensive. Salim says, on my way home from work from North Carolina after 4 days, and the first thing I do is test all the parameters, love all the videos. Thank you very much for watching these videos. And Cameron says that his Regal is dead quiet for him, so there you go. Oh yeah, I can't ship it to Germany for $6. But if you're international and you need me to ship you something, I need you to tell me exactly what you want to get. Because a lot of people say, can you ship to the UK? It's such an open-ended question. I'm like, what do you want, how many of it do you want, and what is your postal code? And then I look it all up, and shipping could be $11, $16, $24. I don't know. But I look it up and I tell you what the price, and then you say yes or no. So there is that. Tyler says, would a 7,000 Kelvin bulb work? It won't be pretty. Where would you find that bulb? That is a very odd number. And are you talking about for a refugium, or are you talking about for your reef tank? Gino, that sounds great. Yeah, that size is a good size tank. I like it. 36 by 20 by 21. And you'll be able to have plenty of light in that tank with the lighting we talked about. Mohammed says, can I put a seahorse in with corals in the tank? Some corals may sting the seahorse when the seahorse tries to grab onto it. It depends what coral choices you have. I've seen some really nice mixtures of seahorses with other things. And my friend Jimmy in Las Vegas, he's been posting a lot of pictures lately. He has a tank that's about this wide, super tall, and about this deep, like 10 inches front to back. And he's got all these different corals, including dendrophilias, which I think are beautiful, and gorgonians. And he has like 15 seahorses in there. And he feeds the heck out of that tank to keep everyone fed. So yeah, you can mix other things. Just kind of make sure they're compatible and not something that's going to hurt the seahorse. Naked Reefer says, I just woke up his wife. You're welcome. Isn't it time to get up by now? Come on. Salim, any other starfish is fine. Except the green brittle. It'll eat your fish. Reef King says, how did you get into reef keeping? Well, back in 1997, I bought myself my first aquarium. I did it as a kid, and then I didn't do it for a long time. And then I got divorced, and the day I got divorced, I went to the fish store and bought myself an aquarium. And I bought some clown, after the tank was cycled, then I bought some clownfish and a piece of live rock. And I was like, wow, live rock is expensive. And feather dusters and this and that. But it was somewhere around, I think it was right at 2002 when I went to my first Machna and I saw corals and on display there. No, that's not true. I saw corals in the fish store and I was buying different ones. Like I bought the Colt coral and I bought mushrooms. And so I was kind of doing a small reef tank at that point. But at Machna, I learned about SPS corals and clams and things like that. And that's when I really delved into reef keeping more intensely, because I suddenly had all this knowledge. After 3 days of Machna and 15 presentations that I attended, I learned so much. I felt like I had all the answers. And I could not only do better for myself, but I could answer people's questions from what I'd learned from listening to other speakers. And that's why I recommend everyone to go to Machna. But that's pretty much how I got started. We are going to wrap this up here pretty quick, guys, because I got to get going. Mermaid's Reef says, any recommendations for not so common soft corals for a seahorse tank? Not common soft corals. That's a loaded question. I'm going to look at my list of soft corals on Critter ID. I mean, Gorgonian is an obvious choice. Goniopora might be a nice choice. The Colt coral is nice. It has movement. I like that one. All the rest are common. They're too common. That's all I got for you. Let's see. All right. Stephen asked a question, and thank you for the super chat, Stephen. I'm looking for advice on a mixed reef tank. My SPS are okay, my LPS are great, but I can't keep any softies alive. Could be that the flow is too great for your softies. I would try them way down low at the bottom of your tank where the flow is weak, where the lighting is weak. Maybe if your rock work is sort of like the shape of a horseshoe, put them in the center of the horseshoe where they're barricaded from each side where they won't be hit by anything. See how that does. And it could be that it's just the tank is too clean because your SPS and LPS are doing so well. You know, SPS need really pure, clean water. You can try using something like Benereef, Benepet's Benereef. It's their reef food. You can try that in your tank a couple times a week. That could also help feed those soft corals. The soft corals, you didn't really explain what was happening to them. Are they melting away? What are they specifically? But you should be able to put pretty much everything in the same reef tank if the parameters are all stable. It sounds like something is off and it's not doing well. Matter of fact, the same moderator that requested this topic had a leather coral that was doing really badly, and he said, I don't get it. I've had this coral for a long time, and all of a sudden it just looks horrible. It's leaning over, it's dying, and so I suggested cleaning it off, and within a couple of days, he happened to observe his Hollywood stunner was putting out sweepers and was stinging that leather to death. And so he's removing the Hollywood stunner or moving it to a different spot or moving the leather and getting it away from the other things. So maybe your soft coral was near something that it can't tolerate being hit. Like if it was near torch corals, for example, the torch will sting it to death. So maybe that'll answer your questions. Fisher Jammin says, any thoughts on plywood tanks? Also, would sand maintenance be a big issue if you have creatures like gobies that sift the sand? Sand maintenance is still important no matter what. And I do recommend it to everyone to definitely keep your sand clean and populated and all the stuff I talked about at the beginning of the stream. And then on the answer of the question of the plywood tanks, I think that's pretty amazing. I mean, when you think about it, it's just like building a boat, right? Except now, instead of keeping the water out, you want to keep the water in. So there are a few people that I know personally that have built plywood tanks where the entire box is made of plywood and then they silicone in a giant window on the front, and that is their viewing pane. I feel like in those tanks, they never try to clean the back of the tank or the walls because of maybe the surface is too uneven to scrape it. And so they actually relish the look of all the coralline and stuff that grows on the back walls. And for me, I like all that clean and gone. So that's a problem for me. But it would have saved me tons of money if I just built my tank out of plywood with 2 windows. That I could have made it myself because I'm a carpenter. But yeah, I've never done that one. I know it's doable. There's quite a process. There's a lot of documentation on how to do it. You're going to want to use a type of resin that you're skinning the inside. Some people even use fiberglass and resin to really reinforce it. There's quite a process to it, but it definitely can be done. And I've actually noticed at some public aquariums when I do the behind the scenes tours, I'll see some of their plywood setups. Some of them are. It's pretty neat. Oh, is Spock in the camera? Tim said, I love the live streams. Would love it if you did maybe a short one during another part of the week, coffee with Milo's Reef. I was playing, I'm always thinking, I don't always have the time to do these things, but I was thinking maybe I should start doing quick little 30-second, 45-second coffee with Mila, like you just said, just a couple of thoughts, keep it really to the point for Instagram. And they'd be super short rather than uploading something really short to YouTube. I don't know. I really do enjoy the streams and I look forward to it, and I schedule my entire week for work, and then on Saturday we do the stream, and then Sunday I hibernate with Disney Plus. That's my new thing. Is 36 inches as a depth too much for a reef tank? If you mean top down, it's just hard to reach the bottom when you're trying to reach in and clean and move things. You're going to always need some kind of tongs that you can reach into the water. And it can be really frustrating when you're trying to clean way down low and you can't get deep enough in there. And if you really bend over to lean in, your armpit will be in the water. And if you're wearing deodorant, the deodorant gets in the salt water. So you would have to think, oh, let me take a shower and not use deodorant, go clean my tank, take another shower, and now put on deodorant and go on with your day. Let's see. Steve says, do you only have bubble tip anemones in the anemone cube? Yes, that is all that's in there, just a whole bunch of them. Tim says, often your live streams happen during the good football games. Well, I don't watch football, so I'm not even aware. I thought that was a Monday night thing. Monday night football, isn't that still a thing? Anyway, I picked 2 o'clock. It works for me. I noticed that Tidal Gardens tends to go an hour before I do, so I'm not stepping on his toes. I'd rather not go later in the day. That way I have some evening to do things like I'm doing tonight. And so the benefit is if you can't watch because you're watching football, then I would say watch the recorded playback later. Fisher Jammin says, what's a fair pricing on aquariums? I see some people trying to sell a 75-gallon for $1,000, and I see a 300-gallon for the same price. Any idea where the fair prices are? It all comes down to the seller and how badly they want to unload something. Sometimes you'll get I was looking for the 55-gallon aquarium that I bought. I was flipping, this is, again, the old days. I was flipping through the newspaper, looking in the for sale ads. I went to Pets, and I found this aquarium. It was a 55-gallon tank with livestock and all kinds of stuff, and they wanted $2,000. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to waste your time. And then like a month later, I saw another ad in the newspaper, and I called the number, and it was the same people. And they said, it's $1,000 now. I'm like, I'm sure it's worth $1,000. I just can't possibly afford that for a 55-gallon. No thanks. And I hung up. And about 3 weeks later, they called me back. They saved my number from caller ID. And they said, would you take it for $500? We need to replace the carpet. We need this gone. And I grabbed a friend and my son and my trailer and barrels and tubing. And we went and picked that thing up and rushed back here. And it used to be right in front of where this 400-gallon is. This used to be a sheetrock wall right here. And this was a wall right here. And this was the door going into the garage. And so I put the tank right there where that rubber stuff is on the carpet, that rubber mat. But yeah, got it for a good deal. So yeah, pricing, it just comes down to what you can afford and how patient you are and, keeping your eyes open for good deals. I saw someone selling a really nice tank for like $750. It was tank stand and probably the sump. I feel like it was in the East Coast somewhere. I'm part of a lot of groups. I think it was like, I don't know. Anyway, it was a really good price, and he hasn't sold it yet. It's still trying to move. I guess it depends on where your market is too. How big of an audience are you competing against when it comes to buying a tank, and how many people are trying to buy it from that seller. But yeah, and pricing also comes down to what it's worth to you. Like if the tank is in perfect shape with no scratches, it might be worth more to pay more versus getting a cheaper one that's really scuffed up badly, or the stand has fallen apart, or the rock is all covered in algae, for example, if it came with all the livestock. That affects pricing too. But typically, when it comes to selling a used setup, it always made sense to me to sell it for 50% of what it cost. So if you bought a skimmer for $200, you sell it for $100. If you bought a tank for $600, you sell it for $300. That kind of thing. But that's just me. I'm sure there's people with a lot of opinions on that topic. Stephen asks if a diamond goby would be a good addition to keeping the sand clean or in good shape, and are they jumpers? I don't know if they're jumpers because they tend to stick down low, but maybe someone will chime in on that one. I haven't kept the diamond goby or any of the gobies because I don't want them covering my stuff that's down on the sandbed. Young says, is it okay to get an orange ball sponge for a reef? I've heard mixed opinions about sponges and reefs, apart from being harder because they're filter feeders. Yeah, that's the problem. It's hard to keep them alive. That's kind of one of those ones that I've heard repeatedly said should not be sold in the hobby. It probably would do great in a refugium. It definitely needs a lot of food. You're going to need to feed it things like phytoplankton, oyster feast, rotifers, and it probably will just kind of wither away. It's probably not going to get near the amount of food it needs. And if you gave it that much food, you might end up with just a mess on your hands. You know, the whole tank just looks like crap because you're keeping a sponge happy. So that might be kind of the opposite of what you're looking at. I don't know if something like Benepets would work with sponges. I'll have to ask them. We've never discussed it, but perhaps it will be another choice of food. I tried a tree sponge once, and I think I did the orange ball sponge once, and they just didn't last but a few weeks. It seemed like I thought the fish were biting it, but then I think it was just kind of falling apart. But my tank was not in great condition at that point when I got it. I got it as I was doing a transfer, and nitrates and phosphates were up. Who knows? I mean, I didn't try it twice. I tried it once, like, all right, never mind. Tim says, I want to start a GoFundMe page where we raise money to buy you the peppermint angelfish. Do I have your permission? No. That's a $25,000 fish, and I would be super stressed by keeping it alive. You just said fantasy. You know, if you had a fantasy fish, what would it be? But that's it, you know. No, we're not going to do a GoFundMe for that. If we do a GoFundMe, it's, you know, for like me getting surgery on my neck or something. But no, thank you for saying that. Jess Moses says, would a torch bother a hammer if it were to touch or vice versa? Yeah, torches are kind of aggressive. They may not get along side by side as much as you'd hope. Try to put some space between them and keep an eye on them. Watch closely, because it could work out or it could be a detrimental. And if it becomes detrimental, you got to separate them even more. All right. I'm going to have to wrap it up, guys. I'm starting to get phone calls now. Apparently everyone knows my stream should be over by now. Let's see. Chris asks, do carbon blocks and filters go bad for RODI systems if they're never opened? You mean brand new, never got wet? They don't go bad. They will be good for a very long time. So don't fear that. If it was a DI, the DI cartridge needs to stay moist, so it should be sealed. If it dries out, it won't be effective. And should I run biopellets from the startup of my tank? No. I would give it a couple of months before you even install them. It's just too soon. There's nothing there for the biopellets to fuel or to feed upon. All right, that's it. We're going to end on that note. Today is Water Test Saturday. Please test your water. I don't care how you do it. Get out your test kits, read your Trident, read your Mindstream, use your Senai, but use your kits. Find out what's going on. Know what your water parameters are, so that way things don't take a turn for the bad because you thought everything was fine. Double check your salinity. Make sure things are calibrated. Clean your protein skimmer. You know, just do the things that are what make your tank look pretty, so that way you can enjoy it. If you've got things in your tank you don't like I recently posted a really quick clip on Facebook and Instagram of me pulling out dead coral skeleton out of the back of my reef, and people were shocked. They're like, wow, that's also going to be in the 6-year anniversary video. Removing that makes the tank look better and increases flow in the tank and makes you feel better inside because you just don't have the reminder of something that didn't make it. So I want to recommend you guys, put some attention on your tank this weekend. And I know there's a live stream again next Saturday, and then the following Saturday I'll be out of the country. So anyway, guys, have a great weekend, and I will see you guys online. Bye!